Hello to all those who have joined nice and early for this David 67 live stream. Great to see. Great to see some people on already. Mr. Tears 03, and I know exactly where you're coming from, Mr. Tears. It's been a day or a week where I've been close to tears, and certainly after last night's really disappointing game and defeat to Dundee United, clearly I've been close to tears all day. Yep, David Starker certainly has something we'll come to talk a wee bit later on in the live stream once we've got a few more people joined in, but certainly that was one of the questions I was going to pose, was just how long do we think Wilfried Nancy still has at Celtic? Good evening to you, Pat McLaughlin, as well. Great to have you on. Great to have you on, Charlie X Guy 23. Actually, to be fit, to answer that wee question, I've got a wee bit of a cold and a flu, so probably tonight's live stream won't be stretching past midnight. I'm probably going to cut the live stream short about 2 hours time or so, but we'll see how we go. But certainly have got a wee bit of a coldy flu virus type of thing. So probably live stream finishing about 11 o'clock, but we'll see how we go, how things go. I might start to feel a wee bit better later on. Yes, I feel massively sympathetic. Excuse me, massively sympathetic to Wilfried Nancy. I think he's been thrown into the deep end. I think his first 3 games were really difficult games that anybody would have struggled to get good results in all of them. I think that's something that Martin O'Neill has said in his talk radio sessions with Jim White and Simon Jordan and so on, is that a game against the league leaders Hearts, a game against Roma, and then a cup final against anybody are all going to be dodgy games. Yep, so that's a very good sentiment. We are all Celtic supporters, and I think Celtic supporters should rally around and support each other. Support each other and support the club. Obviously, people can do whatever they like. They pay their money. They've got the choice to protest and chant and say whatever they say. I just personally would have been so much happier had the Sky Sports audio had Celtic supporters cheering on the players and encouraging the players, much like the Dundee United fans had been doing earlier on when they were losing, rather than sack the board and various different really obscene chants against Wilfried Nancy and chants in favour of Martin O'Neill. But people can do what they like. Those fans made the effort to go across the Dundee, spent their money, etc., etc. I haven't. When I last read anything about 10-15 minutes before we started the live stream, it said that there'd been a meeting between Wilfried Nancy and the board, etc., and he was getting a vote of confidence, which may or may not mean whatever it means. I haven't heard that he's lost his job. I'd be surprised if he's lost his job at 9 o'clock at night on a Thursday, but that was the case, obviously, with Brendan Rodgers. Was he disappeared, resigned, got sacked, etc. There certainly is. I can't see anything on the Celtic news site to say that Nancy has lost his job. There certainly were very strong rumours. very strong rumours put forward by the chap from PLZ Soccer, Peter Martin. Somebody I did used to watch ages ago, but I kind of fell out with his general and his colleagues' general tone of voice and partisanship to certain clubs and stuff. But so great to have you on, Clashman Numpty. It's a live stream that we need to do. This will be the last live stream we do before Christmas. Also planning to have a couple of weeks off from live streams over the Christmas and New Year holidays. So next live stream's planned for Thursday, January the 8th. If there was something major and catastrophic in terms of Celtic, I might well do a special live stream, but I'm not planning to do any more live streams between now and January the 8th. Just simply so I can have a Christmas and New Year with my family, give them some time, etc. I think that's a perfectly reasonable sentiment. I do get a wee bit of a bad feeling about people celebrating Peter Lawwell leaving the club as the chairman at the end of the month, because he's been getting, and his wife and kids, wife and children and grandchildren have been getting physical and verbal threats. He's had to hire private security to protect his house from people abusing him and his family and so on. And if we remember, a few years ago, he had his car and garage firebombed, which caused a fire in the bedroom flat that his daughter and his granddaughter were staying in at the time. So I'm not personally convinced. As I was saying to somebody yesterday in one of the comment sections, I think it was Pat McLaughlin, maybe, can't remember. I think it was Pat McLaughlin, that I don't really see Peter Lawwell leaving the club as the chairman as any real difference, because he'll get replaced by Brian Wilson or somebody else. Maybe Dermot Desmond's son will step up. Maybe Dermot Desmond will take over as the chairman. It'll probably fall to somebody else. They may bring in somebody else. Yep, great to have you on, Paul McGuire. Nice to have you on the live stream. Yes, so I do think quite a lot of the protesting has gone a bit too far. There were reports of physical assaults on directors or executives after the League Cup final win. I was very, very disappointed, upset by losing the. But I certainly think that Paul Tidsdale is very, very lucky to still be in the job, in that he supposedly was, since he's come in, he has been the mastermind of the recruiting and scouting process. That he and Brendan Rodgers were the ones who came together to earmark certain players and scouting players and stuff. Quite often the attendances do go down the last game before Christmas, which of course this game will be, I think. But I wouldn't be too surprised if there was a significantly lower crowd. That maybe actually is that might be partly in favour of the players and the coach and Wilfried Nancy. If there's less chanting and less sack the boards and F this and F that and so on, maybe that does help the players. I certainly don't think that the chants which are against the team, against the players, against the manager, against the club are very, very supportive or helpful to the players. I thought the players last night started off really, really good. We missed so many chances in the first half that Johnny Kenny, well, I wrote down here that he'd missed 4 or 5 really pretty easy chances. Somehow Dyson Maida misses an open goal from 2 yards out, with there being him practically on the goal line, and somehow he hits the headers onto the post. Shin Yamada missed 2 really good chances. Now, to be fair to Shin Yamada, he's hardly played since September. So it's entirely reasonable that Shin Yamada is a bit ring rusty and a bit not really getting to his match sharpness, but that's not the excuse for Dyson Maida. It's not the excuse for Johnny Kenny. Both those players have been practically playing every single game since September. Shin Yamada's had a few minutes here and there. Paul Maguire, I think that this I'll just put this up, and just give me a wee second. We'll just put this one up. Yep. So, sorry, just taking a wee second there. Sorry. So, good question that Paul Maguire and several other people, I think it was David Stockett earlier on, were putting forward, is how many more games should Celtic give Nancy? One or two more games, i.e. the Aberdeen game, and then Livingston, which is the 27th, so a couple of days, obviously, after Christmas. Then sack him before the Rangers game. However, whoever came in, be it Sean Maloney and Mark Fotheringham and Stephen McManus, maybe Martin O'Neill gives up his Christmas in London with his friends and family, etc., and comes back to Celtic as another interim caretaker manager. I don't know. Personally, I would say, and this is going to be a bit controversial, but it's my point of view, probably the thing to do is, as Paul Maguire was kind of suggesting, is give Wilfried Nancy a transfer window, give him a chance to bring in players that actually suit his system far better than the current players. Bring in a couple of centre forwards. I think Johnny Kenny's lack of ability to finish chances shows that Celtic really, really require probably a good target man centre forward, Chris Sutton, a John Hartson. The player that a lot of people are suggesting is Wissam Abu Ali, who plays for Columbus Crew, Palestinian-Danish player. Ideal to play that role in Celtic's team. Louis Mantianu, the Romanian striker, another player who can play up front all by himself. Probably playing a Dyson Maida or Diego Rossi, who also plays for Columbus Crew. There's Matthias Bogusz, who was also playing in Major League Soccer. There's lots of different people that could be brought in. I think certainly they also need a ball-playing centre-back to really improve the distribution. I think if you had a real ball-playing centre-back, that would allow Trusty and Scales and Tierney, whomever, on the other in the middle and on the other side, to stay back more. I think if we do get some of the players who are out injured back into the team, Iheanacho, Johnston, Jota, etc., all those things would be good as well. Don't think the gap between Celtic and Hearts is so insurmountable that it's only after it's 6 points, but we've got a game in hand. We were 6 points behind in the Ange Postecoglou first season and came back to win from there. We've been in similar situations going into the new year before and come back to win. Yep. So a generally weak squad. I think everybody acknowledged that. For one reason or another, or multiple reasons, Celtic didn't do a very good job of replacing players that they'd lost in the January and the summer transfer window this year. We were crying out for a top-level striker. We didn't really get that in. Kelechi Iheanacho, perfectly reasonable, decent striker. Shin Yamada, I think if he actually got a proper chance to establish himself, he would be a perfectly decent striker, but we really needed somebody who could bang in 20, 30, 40 goals a season. And we didn't do that. We didn't really reinforce some of the other areas. On paper, Benjamin Nigrin, Balikwisha, Chunyeki were all potentially good signings. None of them have particularly settled down into Scottish football. The thing is that my personal opinion, and everything I say is my personal opinion, and you've got every right to disagree with me. I'm no expert. I'm just an enthusiast. I think the system, but after all, Dundee United played 3 at the back. St Mirren played 3 at the back. Rangers are now playing 3 at the back. Their form and their results at Rangers have turned around since they went to 3 at the back. I think Celtic know how to play at 3 at the back, but then so I don't think it's necessarily the formation. Same way that there's only so much that Nancy can do. You create in the game. I counted 14 chances, 8 of which were dead easy chances, particularly the Kenny one, which he sclaffed wide with his left foot. He was through on one-on-one with the goalkeeper 3 times and missed. Dyson Maida misses from the goal line. Shin Yamada twice completely free in the box, had only the goalkeeper to beat with his shot, and both times missed quite badly. There's only so much that Nancy can do you put the players on the pitch, you put the best players you can on the pitch, and I don't think he had terribly many other options to bring off the bench as a striker than Shin Yamada. Could have used Nigrin as a striker. He's often played that in his earlier part of his career. Dyson Maida scored 33 goals last season. Under Martin O'Neill, he scored quite a number of goals, but he seems to be just blowing hot and cold. He scored a brilliant goal in the 13th minute yesterday. So I think there's only so much you can do in terms of getting players who should be able to score goals to score goals. I think also personally there's been quite a lot of over analysis and can't think quite what the word is, over analysis and over misinterpretation of what he does and doesn't do. So some people were criticizing him because he lost his temper a bit with the reporter on Sky, and other people are praising him for losing his temper on Sky with the reporter. And some people are saying, oh, he was clapping when Dundee United scored a goal. Well, and there are other people saying he wasn't clapping when Dundee United scored a goal. He was criticised for not showing enough emotion on the touchline. Then in the St Mirren match, he was criticised for showing too much emotion. He was criticised for wearing the wrong shoes, the wrong anorak, criticised for using his little magnetic tactic board, which is a thing that's used by other managers in other sports, but also other forms of that are used by other managers and other coaches to quickly get over changes in formation and stuff. Kevin McMonagle, yes, I think probably the best thing, the fairest thing, and the thing that might actually be best in Celtic's long run, and it is a risk, you are entirely right, is to give Wilfried Nancy the January transfer window a chance to bring in his players, a chance to keep on working with the squad. I think there has been little bits of improvement from game to game to game. The defending has been a disappointment. In the game that we lost to Dundee United, I thought our defensive play from normal open play was fine, but our defence from corners, long throws, or corners as it was Dundee United game, corner for in the St Mirren match, a pump into a high ball into the box in the Hearts game, and also the St Mirren game. I think yesterday it was particularly the defence from corners and dead ball situations that was very, very poor. And that's mostly because not the defenders, but the midfielders and the other people in the box were too slow to get to the ball, which allowed the Dundee United centre-back and then the Dundee United striker to get to the rebounds and the bad clearances quicker and to score the goals. Yes, James Smith, I think what Celtic need is they do need, I think, if the system that Nancy wants to play, we need a ball-playing centre-back who can step forward into midfield. That allows the other two centre-backs to stay back. It maybe then also improves the distribution through the midfield and out wide. What disappointed me yesterday particularly was the number of sideways passes, particularly Callum McGregor, Paolo Bernardo did. In essence, what they're supposed to be doing is getting the ball from the centre-backs and the full-backs or the wing-backs and getting the ball forward. Too often, McGregor was doubling back, putting it sideways, putting it backwards, etc. And then a lot of the momentum was lost. Yes. I don't know whether he would be. I think, given his reputation in previous clubs, he's said to be said to be a very good motivator, said to be a very good tactician, said to be able to get across his ideas quickly. It would appear possibly that some of the players aren't open to playing a different system. I don't think necessarily it's the system. It's just the players are not performing to the best of their abilities. And a lot of the issues we're having at the moment, the erratic defending, the inability to create chances and or the ability to put chances away are the same as we've had all season. Even under Martin O'Neill, if you think about the game against St Mirren that we won 1-0 with the Callum McGregor brilliant shot from outside the box in added time, or the Dundee match where we got off to a good start, Dyson might have scored a goal, we missed tons of chances, and then actually Dundee had 2 or 3 other chances to equalise in that game. So even under Martin O'Neill, there were quite a lot of these warning signs of erratic defending, not creating a lot of chances, as happened in a lot of Rodgers games and quite a lot of the O'Neill games. When O'Neill came in, Celtic were put away a lot of chances to start with, the Falkirk match, the Kilmarnock match, and then as time went on, particularly the last 2 or 3 matches, if you think about the Hibs match, we scored 2 goals in the best part of 2 or 3 minutes. We struggled in the second half of that match to score goals. We defended bravely and stopped Hibs scoring more than 1 goal in the second half. As I said, against St Mirren, they had chances to score. They did score a goal, but it was disallowed in the St Mirren League match. The Dundee match, as I say, Celtic started really well, got an early goal, and then Dundee got more and more into the game. And so even under Martin O'Neill, there were a lot of these warning signs and difficulties there. Just a wee bit of luck here and there, some good defending here and there, and Celtic managed to hold on to their leads in those games. I think that you make a brilliant point there. David Grant. I was thinking of Peter Grant, the ex-Celtic player who's a pundit on Celtic TV. So great point, David Grant. One of the lessons I take from the last several windows is the fact that a lot of the players that Celtic are buying in aren't really hitting the ground running and being real strong difference makers straight away. There are, I think, from the summer transfer window, I think one could say that Kieran Tierney has been a good addition to the team. He's had a lot of good performances. The main problem with Tierney is the fact he doesn't seem to be able to play 90 minutes terribly often. Negrin started off quite well. He seems to have gone really cold. Chinecki had a couple of great games and then kind of went really cold. All the other players haven't really settled in. Balaquisha, etc. The previous transfer window, the winter window, Jota started really slowly. Previous winter window, Nicholas Kuhn started really, really slowly. However, if you think back to Ange Postecoglou's first winter window, we had Hatate, O'Reilly, and Maeda. They all came in and they all were great stars straight away. If you think about the next winter window, Alistair Johnson came in. He made his debut in the Rangers match 2 or 3 days later, and he has been a great, great player for Celtic ever since. So it is a risk, though, of bringing in players. Maybe if Wilfried Nancy has specific players who fit his system really, really well, maybe players that he's coached before. There are 2 or 3 at Columbus Crew who are very well respected in America, very well respected around the world. They maybe, because they know his system, they know him, they know the coaches, maybe they come and settle down quicker. That certainly was the theory with Ange Postecoglou, knowing those Japanese players, Kyogo, Daisen, Rio Hatate, so well that he knew how to use them straight away. I don't think David Pleat's still there. I'm not sure about Mark Cooper. Paul Tidsdale is certainly there, and he is the person that I am really flabbergasted that he still is in a job, because he in essence was the person who was in charge of scouting and recruitment and player development and player analysis in the last 2 or 3 transfer windows. And that's one area where Celtic have really let themselves down, is that particular area. People were pointing out a wee bit earlier on the system that Paul Bloom, who is involved at Hearts, has from Brighton and Union Saint-Gilloise in Belgium. He used the same model at all those different places. And it's really worked. I think Paul Tidsdale is the person that really is lucky to still be in the job, having had the review of the last 2 or 3 transfer windows. However, he is. So my personal feeling is that the best way of taking Celtic forward is to. So if I misnamed Tony Bloom, I'm sorry. As I said a wee bit earlier, right at the start of the live stream, I've been a wee bit under the weather this week with the cold and the flu, etc. So if I do make any accidental errors when I'm talking, I do apologise. So Tony Bloom, if I misnamed Tony Bloom, I do apologise. Anyway, so I don't think David Pleat's involved in the club anymore. I'm not sure about Mark Cooper. David Pleat, Mark Cooper were both people brought in under the instruction of Brendan Rodgers. A couple more of the people who were involved in scouting and recruiting and coaching were all Brendan Rodgers mates from other clubs and other places. So yes, it's been a very disrupted season on and off the pitch. The fact that we're only 6 points behind with a game in hand, despite the fact all of the problems that we had under Rodgers, the temporary improvement under Martin O'Neill, although, as I said, I thought there were still quite a lot of concerning signs, particularly in the later games under Martin O'Neill, the St Mirren match and the Hibs match and then the Dundee match. 3 games that we won, but in all those 3 games, we were making the same mistakes that we had under Rodgers and that we're making under Nancy. We got away with wins in those 3 games, which is admirable. We defended that bit better. So, in terms of who clears out, there have been so many players who have been disappointing. There were some players played better under Martin O'Neill for one reason or another. Some players, I think 2 or 3 players are actually fitting in well with the Wilfried Nancy system. Dyson Maida for me is a difficult one to answer, in that he had some really good form under Martin O'Neill. He scored a brilliant goal yesterday in the 13th minute. He played really, really well in the first half. He gave 3 or 4 chances on a plate for Johnny Kenny. He gave a chance very, very early on in the game also for Haiyun Yang at the back post. And then in the second half, apart from his header into an open goal that hits the post, he pretty much was anonymous in the second half. And that's been the case quite often just recently. He's had the odd good bits here and there. Lorden, 6-3-4-8. Kasper Schmeichel, for me, has been one of the most disappointing players, partly because his distribution this season has been really terrible, which puts Celtic on the back foot. There were half a dozen times yesterday his supposed passes either went out of play or straight to Dundee United players. That's been the case actually quite a few games this season. I think it's probably time either for Celtic to give Viliame Sinisalo a deserved chance, or there's rumours about bringing in Messier from Leeds or Ortega from Man City, both of whom are backups at those clubs. I think that'd be also entirely reasonable thing, assuming that both those people are still match fit. So I think Kasper Schmeichel, head on the chopping block. Hatate has had some good games and some bad games. Engels is another one who has been some good games, but then the last 3 or 4 games, Engels has been pretty awful. His dead balls and corners yesterday evening were terrible. We wasted 3 or 4 really good opportunities from corners. We had McCowan and Negrin getting nowhere near the goals with the direct free kicks. That's a good point, actually. Cashman Numpty is a very good way of putting it. I think there's only so much blame you can put on to Wilfried Nancy. Yes, he changed the system. I don't think the change to the system was actually that great. I think what he was encouraging the players to do is to attack in numbers and defend in numbers. I think he was what his intention was to get one of the 3 centre backs to push forward. When that happens, the other 2 stick back. That when the other team are counter-attacking, you get your wide players to drop back. But because the wide players are more attacking in nature, that means you can counter-attack. You can press the other team in their defensive third. What it requires is people like McGregor, Negrin, Hatate, Engels, Paulo Bernardo, Luke McCown, all these midfielders to be able to pass the ball quickly, to get the ball forward, which is what we did do under Ange Postecoglou in his 2 seasons. A lot of the players who were under that system managed to cope with quicker passing and faster play, etc. under Postecoglou. They don't seem to be able to do that under Wilfried Nancy. They didn't really play particularly quickly under O'Neill. They certainly played very slowly under Brendan Rodgers. So maybe it's just the players have got so used to the slow Brendan Rodgers way that they have kind of fallen out the way of playing the ball quickly. Another good. What's disappointed me also over the last few days is the fact that it's been players like Paulo Bernardo and Johnny Kenny and Austin Trusty who've been put up for all the press conferences. Particularly, I think it's unfair on Kenny and Paulo Bernardo. They're both young players. Trusty, at least, is a bit more experienced. He's played quite a number of times for America internationally. But for me, it should be people like Kasper Schmeichel, James Forrest, Anthony Ralston, but particularly Callum McGregor, who is the players' representative, coming for the press conferences, answering the questions, etc. You make a good point, Kegel and a Moon, that what I would say if you're buying players from Britain, United Kingdom, Europe, etc., you tend to play. You're quite right. You pay over the odds. I think if we were signing players from Major League Soccer or the J League in Japan, both those leagues are out of season at the moment, so they're much more likely to be able to and willing to sell players at this point. Johnson, Hatate, Maeda were all relatively small fees. So I think you're entirely right. It's difficult to get players from United Kingdom and Europe in the winter window because every other European league is still mid-season, where there are titles and cups and European qualifications still on the line. If you buy from Japan or you buy from America at this time of year, they're out of season, so those teams are already in their reorganization phase. So I think we'd be able to get good quality players from those two leagues. The J League and the Major League Soccer League are both much more highly rated in terms of quality of play, quality of teams, quality of players than the Scottish League, at least according to the statisticians and stuff. So I can't remember whose question it was. I do apologise. My concentration is not that brilliant this evening. Engels, massive disappointment. I think, like everything, your girl Bonnie 5. I think you make a brilliant point. I think the blame for when things go wrong at a football club, it tends to be lots and lots of people not doing their job. So recruiting didn't do their job, scouting haven't done the job. The board, and particularly the two executives, Mackay and Nicholson, who are the executives, who have actually a lot more to do with running the club day to day and overseeing all the various different departments. They take a big share of the blame, I think. The coaching staff under Rodgers, the coaching staff under Nancy, those two managers, to an extent also Martin O'Neill and his coaching staff, quite a lot of players under O'Neill, rightly or wrongly, got kind of frozen out. And a few of them have now been brought into the team. People like Yamada, people like Paolo Bernardo, etc. Not having played football for quite a long time. The players, I think, should be taking a massive part of the blame for this as well, because after all, it's them who's on the pitch, it's them who's not passing well, it's them who's not defending well, it's them who's missing. In the Dundee United game last night, 14 chances, of which I put down 8 as being easy chances. Practically an open goal for Johnny Kenny, a definite open goal for Dyson Maeda. There's no way that professional footballers should be missing those chances. And I'm not sure how you can blame Wilfried Nancy for a good young striker in Johnny Kenny. He's played a number of games in Europe for Shamrock or whoever he was on loan with. He's played lots of games internationally under 21 level. He's been now in the full Ireland squad. Quite how he misses 3 times one-on-one with the goalkeeper and misses from less than 6 yards the whole goal to shoot at. How Maeda misses that chance. I'm willing to give Yamada a one game to make bad errors like he did in missing his 2 chances. Well, I hear where you're coming from, Smell the Glove, but if you're on £38,000 a week, which is getting on for £2 million a year, and you've got a contract to play for the club, and you're the captain, you should be playing £2 million worth of player, and as the captain, leading the team on the pitch, leading the team off the pitch, being the spokesperson for the players. He's getting paid the best part of £2 million a year, and so he really should be. He really should be wanting to hang around. He should be wanting to give his best for the club. After all, the club is giving him £2 million this season. Gave him £2 million last season and the season before. Up until just recently, he's been the highest paid player at Celtic for the last 2 or 3 years. Cameron Carter-Vickers a wee bit below him, but now Tierney's higher paid than him. Jota's paid about the same amount of money as him. And for me, here where you're coming from, it's the players the players are on the pitch. Thank you, Bonnie, for agreeing with me. It's just my opinion, and Smell the Glove's opinion is equally valid. All I'm quoting in terms of what the players' salaries are is every year, obviously, Celtic, like any football club that's quoted on the stock market, has to list what the salaries are of all the players, and so as part of all their accounts and stuff, the player salaries are quoted, and there are two or three websites that quote player salaries. The one that often is the most accurate is Salary Sport. I can't remember. There's another person. I want to say it's called Swiss Ramble. He's a person who does a lot of financial analysis of lots of football clubs all around Europe, and especially he has good access to these financial figures. There are 2 or 3 other ones, and by analysing analysing the things like Salary Sport, analyse the stock market, the financial reports. The financial reports are always 1 year behind the current season. And so the salary that Tierney's getting is, Swiss Ramble. Fine, that's fine. I knew there was a guy. I couldn't remember what his name was. Yes, there already are quite strong rumours that Brendan Rodgers is going to be signing Callum McGregor. Very similarly, actually, when Rodgers deserted the club the first time around to go to Leicester. Supposedly, Callum McGregor was the first person that he inquired about buying. Either McGregor or Celtic turned that down. I don't know. Certainly, when I last looked, Lauren, Aberdeen were losing 2-0. I don't quite know whether the Jimmy Tilleen has put out the strongest Aberdeen side, whether he's saving some of the players for Sunday. I don't know. One of the bonuses of it being a Wednesday game before a Sunday game does mean that there are 2 or 3 days potentially of training in preparation for the Sunday game. As I was saying a wee bit earlier on, the fact that the crowd might well be a lot lower than usual, partly due to the pre-Christmas thing, which often does bring crowds down all around the world, partly due to protests of the fans, etc. Maybe that takes some of the pressure off the players. I don't know. So if they're playing their strongest side, which makes a lot of sense because there is prize money to be won. I know they can't qualify at the Conference League, but there are coefficient points to be won. There is prize money to be won. It's a very good point, Lauren. What Rangers seem to be doing at the moment is a lot like what Celtic did under Martin O'Neill, not defending off as well as they can, not putting away their chances, not creating a lot of chances, but they've been finding ways to win games. Rangers have also had more than their fair share of VAR decisions go their way, handballs being given for them, handballs not being given against them. Much the same as Hearts last game against Falkirk. Quite how the Hearts left back, who handles the ball in the line, the ball's going to go into the net. It's not given as a penalty because his arm's close to his body, which is fair enough, except the Ralston one was a penalty. And a similar example that Willie Collum used in his last monthly review thing said that if the ball is net bound, even if it's near your body, it's still going to be a penalty kick. There's no consistency at the moment in terms of what is a handball, what's not a handball, how much contact you need in the box to make it a penalty or not a penalty, how much holding in the box is a penalty. You've also got in the Hearts game and last night in the Dundee United match, the corners that led to the second goals in both those occasions. The corners that led to the goals for both the second goals in the Hearts game and the Dundee United game, when those were freeze framed, Shanklin was offside in the Hearts game, Waters was offside last night in the Dundee United match. VAR can intervene. Thank you very, very much, Mr. Tears. There's absolutely no need to give me money. This is an entirely free service, or if you want to call it a service. I'm not like some of the other channels who only puts up names, only puts up people's names. So there's absolutely, it's a really, 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 really generous of you, Mr. Tears 03, to give me a wee bit of money, but it's not required. I'm not like other channels who put up people's comments if you're their mate, or if you put up if you pay money for it. That's not entirely. But I'm massively grateful and happy Christmas to you as well. As I said a wee bit earlier on, not planning any more live streams over the Christmas and New Year period, unless there's something massive in terms of Celtic happens, such as Nancy gets sacked, Nancy resigns, or something terrible happens to an ex-Celtic player like Kenny Dalglish or Danny McGrain or whatever. Yes, Bonnie, our ability to defend, to use free kicks and corners, and our ability to use long throws into the box, and our ability to defend those three things is this season and actually for years and years has been very poor. It's been a long time. Possibly maybe Lee Griffiths was the last person who was actually any good at scoring goals from a free kick. Our corner kicks have been really, really poor. Engels was showing quite a lot of talent for it, but that seems to have completely disappeared in recent weeks. He wasted 3 or 4 corners when he came on. As I said, McCowan missed a gilt-edged chance from just outside the box. You think about, for those who are a bit older, if we'd had Shunsuke Nakamura in the side, I think there's a massive chance that Shunsuke Nakamura would have put in one or both of those free kicks we had on the edge of the box. We've had similar direct free kicks in quite a few of the games where our delivery into the box has been poor or our shots on goal have been poor. To be fair, I'm pretty sure Austin Trusty is 6'3", Liam Scales is about 6'3", but after that, we do struggle for having any players of height. Ralston's about 6 foot. Alistair Johnson, who admittedly isn't inside at the moment, 5'11". Engels, Negrin are both sort of high 5'11s and so on. But you're entirely right that against Hearts and against Dundee United, against St Mirren, they had big, tall centre forwards, big, tall centre backs, and we struggled to mark all their tall players. Think about the game against St Mirren. Rio Atati, who's 5'7", 5'8", was marking someone 3 or 4 inches taller than him. Not too surprising that player got the jump on him. And one of the problems we have had against all those teams, including Roma, is lack of height in the box. We've only got 2 players who are a bit tall, Trusty and Scales. Tierney's 5'11", 6 foot. He's not tall. We've not got a big, tall Chris Sutton, John Hartson style centre forward who can come back and market corners. Now, supposedly, your girl Bonnie 5, Gavin Strachan was supposedly the person that Brendan Rodgers had. Thank you very much, Lauren. As I said, it's entirely not needed. It's so generous of people. It's so generous of people to give me money for an amateur, enthusiastic live stream. I do try, as I said earlier on, I do try and give everybody a chance to speak. As long as people are pleasant, polite, respectful, I'm happy to accept any opinions. If people start insulting me, calling me names, some really, really hurtful things about me, that's a different matter. But Lauren, thank you so much. I do have the odd drink now and again, more white wine, etc. But mince pie certainly. So thank you so much. So happy Christmas to you as well. Happy Christmas to everybody as well. And I am so grateful. I'm so grateful for people actually spending time to talk to me, keep me company, etc. Anyway, thank you so much, Classman Numpty, for it's honest to goodness, this has cheered me up absolutely no end. I am the way that I felt after the St Mirren match on Sunday, and then the yesterday evening and this morning. I have never ever smoked in my life. Not the biggest fan of brandy either, but I have had brandy from now to again. But cigars, my dad, my uncle, they were big fans of smoking cigars, but I've never ever smoked in my life. So thank you very much for all these things. Happy Christmas to everybody. We'll keep on talking for a wee bit longer. Did say I was going to cut the live stream a wee bit shorter than normal, but I'm quite happy to keep on going for a good wee while longer. Probably another hour or so. I kind of set an 11 o'clock type of thing. Yes, you're quite right. So a 10 pence mixture. I do remember when it shows my age, but I do remember going to the local co-op with an old-fashioned penny and getting 4 bags of sweeties, or going to the shop with a shilling or whatever and getting 5 big toffees, etc. So you're entirely right. A 10 pence mixture is about £1 nowadays. So thank you for your praise and feedback regarding yes. It's kind of something that's kind of gone out of favor as well, and kind of gone out of fashion. So smoking the pipe, but got a couple of older relatives who were big pipe smokers as well. Anyway, getting back to speculation. In terms of Rangers against Hearts at the weekend, I think Rangers could equally beat Hearts at the weekend. I think, much like the last Rangers Hearts game, which kind of hinged on Rangers getting 2 or 3 bad VAR decisions, Hearts getting 2 or 3 good VAR decisions in that match. Hearts have had more than their fair share of good luck with VAR decisions. They should have lost to St Mirren in the game. That game that ended up, I think it was it 2-2? It ended up as a draw anyway. St Mirren had a perfectly good goal disallowed. Rangers had a perfectly good goal disallowed in that game. Hearts got a dodgy penalty. And sometimes when you are on top, you do get the rub of the green. When Celtic were on top under Martin O'Neill, we did get one or two VAR decisions and refereeing decisions that went in our way. We think about last night's game, the non-offside on Waters that led to the corner that led to the second goal. Similar situation in the Hearts game earlier on. Yes, so it has actually cheered me up no end. I think the point I was trying to make was the way I was feeling after the St Mirren Cup final on Sunday, and feeling about after the Dundee United defeat last night was very similar to how I felt after Celtic lost the league title on the last day of the season when we lost 2-1 to Motherwell. 2 goals scored by the lifelong Celtic fan and Australian. Not that I blame your girl Bonnie for Scott McDonald being an Australian scoring 2 goals. He was doing his job. He scored 2 goals for Motherwell late in the match. Celtic blew the title on the last day of the season, and it took me a couple of days to recover from how disappointed and upset I was because Celtic had blown the title on the last day of the season. A couple of people at work said, has somebody died? Has something bad happened to you? It really was just because I really was so het up and so focused on Celtic winning the title that it that it really affected me. And to be thoroughly fair, it is lovely that people are being so friendly, so supporting and cheering me up. My personal feeling is that the quality, if Celtic get anywhere near their best quality, as we did under Martin O'Neill, and maybe things start to flow in a positive direction rather than going in a negative direction, which is clearly what's happening at the moment, I think Celtic actually have decent players at the moment. I don't think the players that Hearts have got, Rangers have got, Hibs have got are that much better, or I don't think they're better than our players. In all those cases, their managers have got their players playing pretty decently. Rangers have had a bit of the rub of the green, a bit of the benefit of luck. VAR decisions going in their way over the last 3 or 4 games. They are defending a bit better. They're creating a bit better. They're putting some of their chances away. Hearts have been really good at all those things. Hearts are defended very well. Tactically, McInnes is doing a great job getting his players put together. I thought, obviously, Robinson for St Mirren, Jim Goodwin for Dundee United. I thought they both coached their teams very well. I think they adapted their tactics better than we did. However, there's also, for me, players on the pitch need to adapt the way they're playing. There's only so much instructions that Nancy can get from the touchline to players in the box who are marking various different people. So it really should be down to the Schmeichels, the Trustees, the Scales, the Tierneys, the McGregors, the Hetatis, etc., to get people organised. It should really be up to those defenders and the midfielders to get people properly marked, all these things. So there's only so much you can do from a touchline to change how things are on the pitch. So I do think the players need to take a lot more responsibility. I think Celtic, if they actually got themselves playing half decently, as we did under Martin O'Neill, that Hibs, Rangers, Hearts are all teams that can beat each other, will beat each other or take points off each other. And quite often you find in leagues where you've got a lot of teams who are much the same in quality, it's often who scores more points in the games where those top 4 or 5 are head-to-head. What's pretty clear for me this season is I don't think Celtic for several seasons have been way the best team in Scotland. So they always beat Rangers, Hearts, Hibs, Aberdeen, whomever the other challenging teams were. We beat those teams week in, week out. We didn't give away stupid points to bottom of the table teams. This season, we've lost to Dundee, we've lost to Dundee United, we've lost to St Mirren in the League Cup. We've had disappointing draws against 2 or 3 other teams that we should have beaten any day. We had a rotten performance against Rangers in that 0-0 draw. I didn't actually watch the Rangers-Hibs game from a few days ago, but a lot of people were saying that Hibs were the better side. They missed chances. Rangers were pretty poor, but did take one of their chances. Well, I think personally that the title is still there to be won. There's 2 possibilities in terms of how we are at this point of the season. Just be a wee second. Just need to change something. Yeah, so for me, there's 2 different ways this season could go. We've got the Ange Postecoglou season, which was the 21-22 season. We were 6 points behind at the turn of the year. Now, admittedly, we did go into a winter break of 2 or 3 weeks at that point, which I think helped Postecoglou a lot, along with a really good transfer window. And we came out at the start of the second half of the season with 3 or 4 additions to the squad, with better tactics, better understanding in the players, and we powered to the title, having been 6 points behind at the end of the season. Or it could be the Neil Lennon COVID season, where we were 16 points behind at the end of the year. Admittedly, we had played 3 more games than Rangers at that point, and ended up coming second, with Lennon being sacked a couple of months into 2021 and then being replaced by John Kennedy as a caretaker. So I think there's 2 different ways this season could go. It could be a COVID season like Lennon, where things get worse and worse and worse. It could be, which is what I'm hoping for, with a good transfer window, with the players at last getting comfortable and buying into the Nancy system, getting 1 or 2 results to get the momentum going again. That's what I'm hoping for, and I still think that's perfectly possible to happen. Others don't think it, which is entirely reasonable. But so we've been in similar situations. 2018-19, we were level with Rangers. We came at the end of the year. We won it in the second half of the season. The next season, 2019-20, we were 2 points clear, but we played 1 more game. So a very similar scenario. So we have had similar scenarios over the years where we've been level or just behind, or in 6 points behind, as it was in the Postecoglou season. All the best to you as well. All the best to you, Garboni, and Pat McLaughlin. All the best to everybody who's coming and going. Good point, Brian O'Rourke. I think that's also part of the problem that teams like Hearts are liable to face in the second half of the season, is that a lot of teams have been more able to analyse the different ways that Hearts are playing, focus on how to stop Hearts better, maybe defend Hearts better at corners, long throws, free kicks into the box, maybe cut down the supply to Shankland, Braga and Kizaridis. Also, I do think that the pressure on some of these players who've never fought for a title before, yes, so none of those players have ever been in a title run before. That was kind of the same with when the Rangers team under Steven Gerrard was starting to show some ability. They hadn't really been in a title battle, and they collapsed and fell away. That was similar to the Rangers under Genevieve Bronkhorst. They had a fixture pile up with their Europa League stuff, but also at points they were leading in the title race or equal with Rangers, with Celtic rather, and then they fell away in the second part of the season when the pressure was on. That was one of the theories when Celtic and Rodgers first season, second time around, went on a run of, I think it was 14 wins and 1 draw after losing to Hearts 2-0 in the game where John Beaton and VAR completely ruined the game. I think Celtic went on a 14 wins, 1 draw in the next 15 games in the league and the cup to end that season, and came from a difficult position where Rangers were in the ascendancy to win that league fairly comfortably. Well, smell the glove. That's a perfectly reasonable point of view, and it may well be right. I personally don't think that Hearts have got the squad in terms of experience and ability to go on and win the title. I would be surprised if Hearts have got the ability to recruit anybody who is really, really good to make their squad even better. Hearts have had, when they had a bit of a dip in form, which is why, after all, we came from being 8 points behind to being level with them going into Nancy's first game. They lost to Aberdeen. They drew quite a number of games that they before were winning. They ran into some problems with injuries. They ran into some problems with fatigue. They ran into some problems with suspensions, particularly to their centre backs. So I think in the second half of the season, that's also going to be the case. Celtic has had particularly bad luck with injuries to key players: Carter Vickers, Johnson, Jota, Kelechi Iheanacho now, Sirachi now. Callum Mosman looks really, really promising, and then he's out for most of the season. Austin Trusty missed a lot at the start of the season. Kieran Tierney clearly has fitness or endurance difficulties. I like your optimism, and I by nature, in terms of football, am an optimistic person. I still think that we have every chance of winning the double this season. I think we've got every chance of, if we don't win the league, of winning the cup. With Wilfried Nancy as a manager, with a different manager. The only thing I think, Branner, you make a great point, but it's all well and good having Jamestown analytics, but you have to have players. If they want to improve their squad, I don't see why people want to come and play for Hearts. People don't want to come and play for Celtic, after all. Lots and lots of players from lots and lots of league turn down the chance to come and play for Celtic. Nowadays, the Scottish League is low prestige. A lot of international managers don't rate it as being a league to get your players to come to. That's slightly different from the Palestinian manager who's recommending that Wissam Abu Ali leaves Major League Soccer to come to Scotland, with the view to moving from Scotland to a bigger European league. Over the last two or three seasons, Celtic and Scottish clubs have lost the ability to attract promising young players from Europe. A lot of those players are now going to Dutch football and to Belgian football rather than coming to Scottish football, or they're going to English Championship as their stepping stone to get to the English Premier League or to get to a bigger European league. So I don't personally think that Hearts are going to be able to recruit anybody of particularly good. So Clashman Numpty, that's personally, I think the problem that Celtic have got is it's now mid-late December. The January transfer window opens in 14 days time, 1st of January, or approximately. We've got obviously we've still got three or four games, whatever it is, in we've got 4 games. I think it's 4 games left in 2025. We've got the Rangers match at the start of the new year. We've got a couple of big and important European games. We've got games pretty much every once or twice a week, or twice a week rather, from now right through to January, February, end of January through February, etc. Yes, I think the Scottish League has got interesting, and I think that's kind of what I was saying earlier on. Is I think the Celtic's quality has dropped to the quality of Hibs, Hearts, Rangers. I think also the gap between Celtic and the Dundee Uniteds, the St Mirrens, the Falkirks, the Aberdeens is smaller than it used to be and smaller than it should be. A great point. Football is life. 1595. I go into every match practically expecting Celtic to win. If people watch my videos, practically every single game I've ever predicted a score, I'm predicting Celtic to win. Slightly different when we've taken on the Borussia Dortmunds, the Atalantas, the Bayern Munichs, the Real Madrids, the Romas, etc. So the Scottish League potentially is that wee bit more interesting because Rangers, Hearts, Aberdeen are getting closest, and the inverted commas of the smaller teams have got closer to this as well. Everyone's got a different opinion as to what the best thing to do. I don't personally see the board members, etc., leaving or resigning or being sacked. Dermot Desmond clearly has massive power at Celtic. He controls the club, even though he isn't an executive on the board. He isn't actually at the club very much, but he controls the club. He controls all the ins and outs. I don't personally see him sacking anybody. I don't see the board changing. What I do think is best for Celtic is for everybody to get behind Celtic, support them. So when Celtic do go 2-1 down against Dundee United, that there is massive cheering to help Celtic get back into the game, much like Dundee United supporters kept on supporting them, much like St Mirren supporters kept on supporting them when it went to 1-1 in the cup final. I do think the players get affected when it's sack the board and various different chants that are quite obscene against Wilfried Nancy. I think the players realise they're not playing particularly well at the moment. I think they realise that they're letting themselves, their manager, their coaches, the club, the fans, etc. down. And I think those sort of negative, toxic chants, obscene chants, I think that affects the players' confidence and player on. Well, yes, perfectly good, perfectly fair enough. You poor wee lambs, but they are only human beings, and I get upset when people are critical. I'm sure, Smell the Glove, if people criticise you, are nasty to you at work or in your social life, your personal life, it affects you. So I'm sure that the negativity at the club, the negativity in the media, the pundits, the chants, the quietness in the crowd, I think all these things get to the players simply because they're human beings like us all. I got really, and as all of us are doing, all of us have got really upset because Celtic lost the cup final, lost to Dundee United, lost to Hearts. We all get upset when we lose. The players all get upset when they lose. I honestly don't. I think the standing section is a really good idea. I think it's a throwback to the good old days of football where it was all terracing with a small sitting down section in the stand. I think it's actually a really good thing. Now, I don't know all the ins and outs of all the situations. There reportedly was quite a significant incident involving the security people, the police, and some of the fans. There had been a lot of other clubs, police, etc., stewards from other clubs had raised various different issues of some Celtic fans going to other grounds. I don't know all the ins and outs of that. A lot of the impetus to shutting down that standing section related to the safety board at Glasgow City Council being reluctant to keep on doing the safety certificate. So I think there's there's lots of ins and outs to that situation, and there's an ongoing court case, ongoing police investigations, search warrants, court warrants, all kinds of things. So I think there's probably more to that behind the scenes. Same way that obviously I don't think anybody could ever support Peter Lawwell having to get security guards to guard his house and protect his wife and daughter and grandchildren, protect him. I don't think anybody could ever say that it's the right thing to do to physically assault people after the cup final. So I personally can't see why anybody would say it's the right and proper thing to do to physically and verbally intimidate and cause someone to have to spend money to protect his house and protect his family. But some people think that's legitimate. I don't think it's legitimate. I don't think there's lots of different things. Brian O'Rourke, you make a good point. But Celtic are a public limited company. We are limited. We are on the stock exchange, so that's the situation. So maybe we should be a fan-owned club. Fine. I'm not sure there is the expertise amongst the fans to actually to take Celtic forward. But maybe there are some brilliant financial experts, some brilliant legal experts, some brilliant people who are experts in negotiations, merchandising, contracts, sponsorship, all these things, who are just Celtic fans who could then suddenly take over and run the club even better than Nicholson and Mackay and so on. The board made lots and lots of mistakes because they're human beings as well. And they make mistakes because they can't always get everything right. Celtic is very, very financially secure. Unlike virtually any other team in Scotland, we actually are financially secure, which does actually protect us in rainy days. And at the moment, this is a rainy day or rainy season, etc. I can't think of there being any massive football clubs who are fan owned. There are a few clubs around United Kingdom who are fan owned. I'm not convinced. A lot of different clubs have different management structures and board structures, etc. Some have more fan input than others. Reportedly, after the fan survey, that was something that I beg to differ. The board are human beings. They are people who've got wives and children and grandchildren. They are people who've got a life to lead. They have got a right to privacy, etc. They don't really deserve to be physically or verbally assaulted. They don't really deserve to have to pay money for private security guards to protect their house. For me, that's not football. That's not good. And I know it's not strictly the same thing, but Celtic used to be a club that was more managed by certain families, etc. We got ourselves into tremendous financial problems in the 80s and 90s. We were practically bankrupted in 1994. Fergus McCann came in. The whole financial structure of the club changed, became a financially well-run club, a club with lots and lots of money. I think having lots and lots of money helped us through a period in Scottish football when all the other bigger teams, Aberdeen, Dundee United, Hearts, Hibs, Rangers, all of them Dundee, bankrupted themselves, went out of business. Dundee went out of business, got resurrected. Rangers obviously went out of business, got resurrected. Hearts were very, very close to being out of business altogether. Dundee got financial input from Americans. Hibs got financial input. Hearts got financial input. They've now got the Tony Bloom financial input. But from the 90s through to the 2020s, Celtic, after Fergus McCann took over, changed the way. Celtic has actually been a rich club. They've been a secure club. Whilst quite a lot of the other teams in Scotland went bankrupt, or like Rangers, they are in currently and previously in danger of going bankrupt again. I think if we're referring to the incident, it was the police and the courts that kicked down the doors rather than. So my understanding was the security guards reported something to the police. The police then took action. Police then referred it on to the Procurator Fiscal, who then issued court warrants, which then led to raids on those houses with court warrants. So, but as I said, this is a legal matter currently going through the courts in Scotland. So probably better for us not to talk about it. Anyway. I think we're kind of going down a bit of a rabbit hole, which people are perfectly fine to talk about. I'd be much happier, particularly with it being Christmas in 7 days' time, for us to start trying to find positives where there may not be positives, trying to look at Celtic's future, trying to debate whether giving Nancy a well-funded transfer window, 20-30 million pounds, plus any money that we get for selling Hatate, Maeda, Yang, whoever else Nancy chooses to let leave the club. I think it was David Stalker, certainly somebody earlier on else was talking about quite a number of players probably have reached the end of their Celtic career. I think some probably need to move on. Some, I think, need to get their role at the club promoted. I think some players have fitted in pretty well to the system. I think Kieran Tierney shows quite a lot of ability to play left centre-back and even played at left wing-back really well. However, his energy to complete a whole 90 minutes is not very good. I think Austin Trusty is doing a good job of being the one and only Celtic defender. He, in the 4 games, he's been basically Celtic's defender who stays back. I think he's actually defended really pretty well. I don't think he's made terribly many mistakes as Celtic's main defender since he's gone to the more centrals area in place of Scales, who got moved further over, and then obviously Tierney's played that position as well. I think Yang's actually fitted into the system better than one would expect. McGregor really hasn't warmed to the system. I'm not quite sure why not, because under Postecoglou, he showed the ability to pass quickly, as did Hatate, as did Maeda. They were able to play very, very quickly under Ange Postecoglou, but they don't seem able to play quickly under Wilfried Nancy. The system under Postecoglou, although it was 4 at the back, was actually very similar. The wing-backs or the full-backs actually played a lot further forward under Postecoglou. We often were defending just with 2 centre-backs in many games. To be fair to Brendan Rodgers, he also quite liked having one or both of his fullbacks as inverted fullbacks, which again meant often it was Carter Vickers, Trusty, Scales defending as a 2 at the back, which did leave us a bit open to counter-attacks quite often. I think one of the problems that Celtic has at the moment, particularly, is the lack of a reliable finisher. Last season, Ida 20 goals, Kuhn 21 goals, Maeda 33 goals. So last season, with 3 people, all of whom were good, reliable goal scorers. Before that, Kyogo and Giacomakis were good, reliable goal scorers. But this season, we've had a few goals from Maeda, a few goals from Nygren. Nygren's gone off the boil. Maeda's been on and off. I fully appreciate what you're saying, Kegler Moon. So Lawwell, I think he was at the club as the CEO from about 2003. He also has been a very important voice for Celtic and for Scottish football at UEFA, and also this Union of European Clubs. He's been one of the leading voices, the leading people at UEFA in terms of European club football, supporting Scottish football and Celtic at UEFA, but also at this Union of European Clubs. I think that's also very, very important. That's clearly going to be lost in terms of Celtic influence in those two places. Whether Lawwell carries on at UEFA and the simply as a person, which is perfectly possible because most people at UEFA haven't got club affiliation. But so I do think Lawwell helped Celtic through potentially a difficult financial time. I think he did do a very good job in terms of sponsorships, shirt deals, merchandising, lots and lots of different ways. Coming back as the chairman, that doesn't seem to work terribly well, and I think that's lots and lots of different factors for that. But I don't think him being intimidated, his family being intimidated, his wife and grandchildren and daughter getting intimidated, I don't think that's at all good. Tone 70. I fully see where everybody's coming from. Celtic have started very badly under Wilfried Nancy. To be fair, the game against Hearts, the game against Roma, a cup final, they're not easy games for anybody to manage or coach a team. I think personally there's a perfectly good argument to say that Celtic should have stuck to playing a 4-3-3. Not that actually Martin O'Neill's played a 4-3-3. He tweaked the formation. It still was a basic 4-3-3, but you could talk about it being a 4-2-3-1, all kinds. So Martin O'Neill actually did change the Brendan Rodgers system to an extent. He had Engels and McGregor playing a bit deeper. You had Hatate playing a bit further forward. You had the wingers playing a bit deeper. You had a main striker. He did stick to four at the back, so that was the defensive setup was much the same, going from Rodgers to O'Neill. But he did change the way the midfield worked. He did change the way that the wide players worked. He did change the way that the main striker worked from the Rodgers days. At least that's my interpretation. I think that's I think Wilfried Nancy has the skills from previous times to say that he is up to the job. I was surprised that people like Maloney, McManus, Fotheringham completely disappeared out the coaching structure, whether that was Nancy's decision, whether that was the decision that those three people made, whether it was a decision that was made by Dermot Desmond, whether it was a decision made by Michael Nicholson, I don't know. I was surprised that Maloney, Fotheringham, McManus, who all were key factors under O'Neill's renaissance, I was surprised all three of them left. Of the Celtic coaches that remained, Gavin Strachan probably would have been the lowest on my list, but he's the one that remained. I don't think he has the same abilities as Maloney, Fotheringham, and McManus have. Don't think he's got the same amount of knowledge of Scottish football that those ones have. Fotheringham also has obviously coaching knowledge from all around Europe. Maloney has international experience. He's coached in England. He's coached in Scotland. Not terribly successful as a manager, but very successful as a coach and assistant manager. So I was surprised that he moved on. I was surprised that Nancy immediately went to a 3-4-3 rather than sticking to the 4-3-3. 4-3-3, 4-4-2, 5-3-2 were all formations that Nancy actually did use with Columbus Crew and with Montreal, just not very often. And he played a variation of the 3-4-3, but then St Mirren and Dundee United played three at the back. Rangers are playing 3 at the back. So I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with the system. Just the players, for one reason or another, aren't playing that system very well. Just like they weren't playing the adaptations that Rodgers put into the formations. Also, Neil, when he was first time around, did change Celtic's formations a lot. Somebody was saying that Celtic have been playing a 4-3-3 for 25 years. It certainly wasn't my memory that Celtic under Martin O'Neill in the 2000-2005 spell played a strict 4-3-3. It was quite a fluid thing. We did have players. Typically, we had Lennon and Lambert, sometimes Thompson in the middle. We had wider players like Moravchik and Didier Agat. We very often played with Chris Sutton as a target man centre forward and Henrik Larsson as a sort of old-fashioned inside forward playing off him. So very often we played quite a strict 4-4-2 under Martin O'Neill for that first 5 years. So Celtic actually has changed its formations a lot over the years. Now, admittedly, Rodgers, Lennon, Postecoglou, Rodgers again have played a 4-3-3. So I think it's the players have not adapted to the system. The players haven't bought into the system. The players who should be able to play the system aren't playing the system. It's complicated. And I do agree that there are people. The board are the ones who appointed Nancy. Paul Tidsdale appears to have been you've got every right to want Celtic to lose the league and finish third or fourth. I can say in 54 years of supporting Celtic, I've never ever wanted them to do anything other than win the game, win the cup, win the league, etc. So, but you've got every right as a Celtic supporter, as a human being, to want the team to fail. I would never want Celtic to fail. But then, if that's what you want, that's your choice. I want Celtic to come first in the league. I want Celtic to win the treble. And for the first 25 years or more of a Celtic supporter, Celtic, when I was very wee, we were winning doubles and so on. We didn't win the treble. We won the treble when I was not a Celtic supporter, i.e. when I was 1 or 2 years old. We won the treble under Jock Stein. Then, despite the fact we were winning lots of leagues in the second half of Jock Stein's career, we didn't win the cup and the League Cup every season. Then we went through the spell up to 2000 when we hardly won anything at all. We won the league in 97, 98. Then had a couple of barren years. Then under O'Neill onwards, we've won lots and lots of leagues, won lots and lots of doubles and trebles in the last 25 years, 13 out of the last 14 leagues. So I always want Celtic to win. And for half of my life as a Celtic supporter, we won absolutely zip or next to zero. Yes, and to be fair, you make a good point, and Martin O'Neill did make actually quite a number of pretty big signings. When he came in 2000. We got Sutton, we got Hartson, we got Thompson, Lambert and Lennon came in. We did sell on with Viduka, which did get some. In essence, we sold Viduka and bought. Yes, the camera is on a tripod. I think the tripod is slightly squint. It's slightly squint and slightly offline. I do apologise. I'm a bit tired for getting it perfectly square again. Every now and again, the camera freezes, which means I have to plug it in and plug it back out again, which means I do have to move the camera. I'm sorry if the camera is a bit squint. I'm sorry if I do apologise. As I said right at the start, I am a complete amateur. My IT equipment's not brilliant. My camera's not brilliant. The microphone I got for Christmas last year is probably the best bit of equipment I've got. I was given a £50 voucher 3 years ago for my birthday, and the camera is what I bought with it. It's not a particularly good camera. The tripod is a tripod my brother gave me. So I do apologise if we're a bit squint, a bit offline. I do apologise. I think a lot of people do want the board to go. I don't think the board are going anywhere. The only way the board are going anywhere is if Dermot Desmond decides he wants to sack Nicholson, sack Mackay, sack everybody else, and bring in other people. Whether that helps at Celtic, I don't know. The other option at Celtic is somebody gives Dermot Desmond £300 million, £400 million. There's been different estimates as to how much Celtic's worth as a football club, with its share price, with its resources, with its stadium, with the players, the merchandising, the shops, all the other things. Some people were suggesting 250 million, some 300 million, some 400 million. So if anybody does have a spare 400 million pounds to buy out Dermot Desmond's share of the club, or to buy all the shares in the club and completely start the club afresh with its own team, great. I personally can't see the board going anywhere unless Dermot Desmond decides to sack everybody, or Dermot Desmond decides to sell his 34%. To buy his 34% wouldn't require so much money as £250 million, but it would require a massive amount of money, particularly because he wouldn't be selling the shares because he has to sell them. He'd be selling the shares to make a bigger and bigger profit. And he already is an extremely rich man. He's a billionaire. So it does disappoint me that people are so sad and so upset and frustrated that they want Celtic to lose. As I said, everybody has the right to make their own decision as to whether they spend their money on tickets, merchandising, coffee, food, the new Celtic strip, etc. Celtic have, as we all know, a lot of money in the bank. What I do think happening if Celtic don't get money in through tickets and merchandising, etc., it just means next year and the year after and the year after, they've got less and less money to buy players, less and less money to give players who are at the club big rewards and contracts. Celtic have got their biggest ever wage budget in terms of players, and their biggest wage budget in terms of other staff. So Celtic gave everybody at the football club, the players, the coaches, the backroom staff, the groundsmen, the admin people, the financial people, the lawyers, everybody at Celtic got a pay rise to bring everybody's weekly wages, monthly wages up to inflation, etc. So Celtic actually gave all their staff, playing and non-playing staff, a big reward by bringing their wages up to a good level, up to keeping up with inflation. We've got our biggest ever wage budget in terms of football players was last season. It's even bigger this season. It's going to be even bigger next season, assuming that all the players who are at the club now are going to be at the club next year. Players like McGregor, Carter Vickers, Johnston, lots of others are on long-term contracts at Celtic. Yeah, and the other thing with Martin O'Neill in 2000, he did inherit a few good players who'd been bought by previous managers. Moravcik had been bought by Venglos. Wim Jansen bought Henrik Larsson. Stilian Petrov came in under John Barnes the previous season. So he actually inherited some pretty decent, good quality players. Larsson, Petrov, Moravcik were all very, very important players in the 2000 to 2005 spell with Celtic. We then obviously brought in Sutton, Hartson, Lambert, Lennon, Thompson, several others. Yes, I think Petrov. You make a good point. I think Stilian Petrov was a very good player for Celtic. Really unfortunate to break his leg. I was actually at the game live to see him when he broke his leg, which is a really, really quite distressing thing to see. Then I'm not massively sure whether he decided he wanted to move to the English Premier League or whether in any way he was forced out by Celtic. He certainly seems to be one of several Celtic players who's been quite loyal to the club, been quite supportive generally of Celtic in the media and so on. That's an interesting theory. Certainly, from Dermot Desmond certainly has the money to buy out the Lindell Train Group, who own about 15%. There's lots of other smallish shareholders. There's quite a lot of the shares are owned by big American banks and big English banks and financial institutions. And so that's an interesting theory. I don't know whether Dermot Desmond is quite that sort of benevolent person who wants to share his billions with the common man, etc. I don't know. It would be a very, very, very good public relations exercise if he did. He certainly got the money for it. He's one of the businesses that he owns. He reportedly was selling off his share of that, and the business was being sold for £1 billion. It was some form of Irish private healthcare company. I'd be very surprised if that happens, but you never know. I think certainly that all the power in Celtic is with Dermot Desmond at the moment. Yes, I completely agree. Tone 70. I said a wee bit earlier on in the live stream. We won all our domestic games. We didn't play that brilliantly against Rangers. We were playing against 10 men for a lot of the game. Rangers were pretty much, having gone down to 10 men, they kept in the game. They got a late equaliser through a controversial penalty, possibly due to the fact they were playing with 10 men. In extra time, we kind of took over that game, but we didn't play brilliantly against Rangers. We played pretty poorly against St Mirren in the league and then Dundee in the league. We had a good spell against Hibs, where we got 2 goals in quick succession, then kind of defended frantically. We got absolutely played off the pitch by Michelin. We lost 3-1. It could easily have been 5-6, 7-1. We had a really good performance against Feyenoord. That was a game where we defended pretty well, but for a rare thing this season, we were actually quite efficient in front of goal. We didn't have as much possession as Feyenoord did. We didn't actually have that many shots on goal against Feyenoord, except we put 3 of them away, which is something we've not done in any other game this season. As I say, O'Neill's last 3 games, St Mirren, Dundee and Hibs, we wasted a lot of chances, and on another day, if luck was against us, those games could easily have been draws. Yeah, see, that it would disappoint me if there's a bad atmosphere on Sunday, because I think it's not going to. I don't think it's going to help the players. I don't think it's going to help Wilfried Nancy. But everybody has, as I said earlier on, everybody's got the right to do. It's their money they're spending. It's their ticket money. It's their season ticket money. It's their merchandising money. Everybody can. So great. Thank you so much for Brian Urich. All your brilliant comments over the course of the last hour or two. Happy Christmas to you. Happy Christmas to everybody who's still on the live stream, but thinking of leaving soon. Yep. So yes, I would be disappointed if people don't support the club and cheer them on, and if things aren't going well, to keep on cheering, etc. Not that this season in general terms, when Celtic have been on the back foot or not doing well in the game, the crowds have often gone silent. There's also often been quite a lot of chanting and negativity and toxicity. With all the increasing protests against the board, that's got more and more and more. I think if fans want to go to the game, the fans should go to the game. I think if fans do go to the game, they should do their best to support the players as much as they can. My personal feeling is probably, if Celtic don't win on Sunday against Aberdeen, that probably will be Wilfried Nancy's last game, which I don't think is actually going to be good for Celtic in the long run, simply because it's Christmas, it's New Year, it's the transfer window, and so whoever gets brought in, I can't see it being anybody who's going to be a permanent manager. Whether people would be, so the one option would be to bring, so if Nancy is sacked after a bad result on Sunday against Aberdeen, which is perfectly possible given the fact that there's so much toxicity and animosity and attacks on Wilfried Nancy, and no matter what he does on and off the pitch, no matter what he says in an interview, says in the press, says on Sky, no matter what he says, everybody is turning against him. It was interesting in the surveys that I watched and read prior to him coming, it was about a 40 to 50% of people didn't want him to get the job. even before he'd ever got the job. So already he was on a sort of losing wicket, or sort of, people weren't willing to accept him before he got the job. So about half the Celtic support in the surveys, which admittedly isn't half the Celtic supporters, it's just half the ones who filled in the survey or responded to the survey, didn't want him to be the coach. And I think certainly the way that the fans have reacted is kind of forcing Wilfried Nancy out unless the results change as of Sunday. Reportedly, according to a couple of sources, Nancy and the board have given him 2 more games, i.e. the Aberdeen game and the Livingston game. I personally think it's a bad time to change a manager. It was potentially, one could also argue that it was a bad time to change our manager when we changed our manager. I don't personally think that Martin O'Neill, when he took over the job as a caretaker interim, I think he thought he's going to be the caretaker interim manager for 2 weeks to 4 weeks. I think, as he said multiple times, I think he expected he was going to be out of his caretaker job by the end of that international window. Now, that made a lot of sense. That would have given Nancy a bit of an easier run into his time as Celtic manager. It would have given him a bit of time actually to work with a lot of the players in that second week of the international window. Due to work permit problems, visa problems, all these things, taking the expected time rather than the speeded up time. So if anybody was moving from America or Canada to work in Scotland, be it they're American, Canadian, Europe, or French in this case, they have to get a visa, have to get a work permit, and that typically takes 3 or 4 weeks as a minimum, up to 8 weeks for most common or garden people. Sometimes with footballers, managers, coaches, that period can get cut down to a week or 2. However, the Scottish office in Holyrood didn't speed up the processing for Nancy and his coaches. So only actually Kwame Ampadu probably could have come straight into being a Celtic coach. All the others had to wait 4 weeks, 5 weeks to get their work permits, which I say is the typical thing for anybody. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought. I can't remember what I was trying to talk about, but basically, it was a bad time for us to change our manager. I think the expectation was we were going to change the manager in that international window, where in the second week we would have had a lot of the squad for half the week, the whole of that squad, half the squad for the whole week, and the other player coming back from international duty would have been there for the last 3 or 4 days. That fell through. Then O'Neill had 3 more games to manage Celtic. So if we're looking at somebody who can come in straight away to manage Celtic, maybe that's what Celtic are doing. Maybe they're negotiating with O'Neill. Maybe they're negotiating with Nicky Hayden, the Belgian manager of Bruges. He reportedly was one of the ones who was on the initial shortlist. I don't think Kjetil Knutsen is a goer. What he said to Bodo Glimt was he was going to carry on managing Bodo Glimt until they were out of the Champions League. So that's talking about the end of January at the earliest, by which time all the transfer window's gone. So part of the Celtic problem, as I look at it, is the fact that if we sack Nancy today, tomorrow, after Sunday, after the game on the 27th against Livingston, we're still in chock-a-block of fixtures, the transfer window coming up. It's a really bad time to Nicky Hayden, the talk was that Genk or Ghent were looking to have him, but when I checked this morning, he hadn't been given the job as of this morning. maybe he's been given it since that time, but the stories were that Genk were looking to employ Nicky Hayen. I hadn't seen that being confirmed. Same way that reportedly, if Celtic did sack Wilfried Nancy today, tomorrow, 2 days' time, 5 days' time, that Saint Etienne in France will snap him up straight away. The story was that there were actually 2 or 3 French clubs that wanted Wilfried Nancy to be the manager. None of the clubs that in France who wanted him to be the manager were the size of Celtic, so not too surprising they chose to come and be Celtic's manager. But it does appear that if Celtic did sack him, that he's got 1 or 2 clubs in France who would take him at the drop of a hat. Now, that seems to be the case with Nicky Hayen. Got sacked by Bruges, and one of the other big Belgian clubs is thinking about getting him in. I didn't think it was confirmed that he'd gone to Genk, but maybe over the course of today it has been confirmed. It's a good question. I when I first heard and read the O'Neill thing on Talk Sport, I thought, did he mean that he would have happily stayed on at Celtic for another couple of weeks? He then talked in his stuff with Jim White and Jordan that he was thinking about getting back into management. One of the benefits, of course, of Martin O'Neill's style of management is he doesn't actually do any of the coaching. All the coaching was done by Strachan, Woods, Maloney, Fotheringham, McManus. O'Neill just kind of observed things and did a lot more of the motivation, the team talks, the selections. So even the fact he is 73, probably it's actually a role he could carry on doing at 73. Whether he wanted the pressure of being the Celtic manager, he also did say himself in his things on Talk Radio that when he took over at Leicester, it took him 10 games to get any wins. He was saying that he himself, had he been the manager for the Hearts game, the Roma game, the St Mirren game, that equally he could have lost all those games as well. I think he maybe was implying that the quality of the players, the consistency of the players wasn't good enough. And so he was kind of thinking that, particularly because the form and performances had dipped a bit in the Hibs, St Mirren and Dundee matches, that things could actually start falling apart even with him as the manager. He also kind of said in his thing on Talk Radio that if Celtic asked him, he would come back to Celtic. Whether that's the case, I don't know. Whether he would come back to Celtic as if Celtic were to sack him, Nancy, after the Aberdeen match, whether O'Neill would come back in a couple of days before Christmas with a game on the 27th and then the Rangers match at the start of the new year, I don't know. Certainly Sean Maloney could come in. You're entirely right, Lauren. Maybe if Sean Maloney came in with McManus and Fotheringham as his assistants, with Stevie Woods and Strachan and the other coaches behind the scenes, that might well be a goer. The only thing I would say to counteract that, or in contrary to that, would be the fact that at Hibs, Maloney was not a big success. At Wigan and in English football, he's not been a big success as the manager. But maybe if he had McManus and Fotheringham and Woods and Strachan and so on beside him, maybe he would be a much, much better manager at Celtic. You're entirely right. He seemed to be the person who did the tactics, the training, etc. He seemed to be the person that was giving a lot of guidance to O'Neill, and O'Neill was relying a lot on Maloney's guidance and relying also, it would appear, a lot on Fotheringham's guidance, which is why I was quite surprised that both Maloney and Fotheringham left when O'Neill left. and McManus and Maloney have gone back to other jobs at the club. I think you're entirely right. He probably should have spent far longer with Martin O'Neill. Now, Martin O'Neill did actually have a flight to catch back down to London. Within a day or two of getting back to London, he was on being a pundit on either a European channel or an American channel. Within a couple of more days, he was back on top radio. So quite clearly, it would appear that Martin O'Neill had a couple of different contracts and agreements to go back to that were arranged for him to go straight back into when he was back down in London. So whether O'Neill would have stayed for a 15-hour chat, I don't know. In that he actually did have a flight back down to London later that day and already pre-planned. I don't know. So there are lots of things that are surprising, and it's difficult to know whose decision it was. I don't personally see Wilfried Nancy as being arrogant or rude. I think some of the things he's saying are being misinterpreted. I think some of the things that Wilfried Nancy is saying are being a bit misinterpreted. I think when he says when he talks about winning and losing, what he's actually saying is the most important thing is getting the team playing well, because if the team plays well, it'll win. I don't think he's saying that losing doesn't matter to him. I think what he's saying is getting the team to play well is what matters, because if the team wins, if the team plays well, the team will win. And I think that's also true. Talking about he's also talking about attack being the best form of defence, i.e. if you pin the other team in their half or in their defensive zone, you don't have to defend so much. But when you do defend, you defend with 5 or 6. So your midfielders, your wide players have to come back and defend. So I don't think he's implying you only defend with one person, you only defend with 2 people. I think he's implying, which is what he did at Columbus Crew, he generally defended with 4, 5 or 6 and attacked with 6 or 7. So what he wanted was players that were mobile, could go box to box, midfielders who could come back and help in defence, wide players who could come back and help in defence. And after all, Dyson Maida does a great job when he plays out wide on the left, dropping back into midfielder, even coming back to help at left back. So some of these things are not actually rocket science. It's actually things that Celtic were already doing in a different fashion. Yes, Port Job Express. I think I don't think Celtic under Martin O'Neill in the 8 games that he was the interim caretaker manager, I think several of those games we didn't play particularly well, but we did win the game one way or another. You got every right to your opinion. I think Wilfried Nancy, as a French person, did know a lot about Celtic. I think he did do a lot of research about Celtic. You could also say the same thing about Wim Jansen not knowing anything about Celtic when he came in to manage Celtic in 97, 98. Joseph Venglos. You could say the same thing about Ronnie Dahlia. You could say the same thing about Ange Postecoglou. How much knowledge Ange Postecoglou had of Celtic when he came in the summer of 2021, I don't know. A lot of people found Ange Postecoglou a bit rude and abrasive in his press conferences when he dealt with the press. A lot of people found Gordon Strachan quite rude and aggressive with the press. Martin O'Neill, actually, when the pressure was getting on, particularly after we got thumped by Midtjylland, he got a bit shirty and short-tempered and so on with the press. Yes, the thing there's one of that's a brilliant point, Lauren 6348, really brilliant point. What's disappointed me is since Nancy came in, a lot of the leaders like Schmeichel, like Forrest, like McGregor, to an extent, you could also say that regarding Hitati, Maeda, who have both been in the club for a long time, Kieran Tierney. Not enough of these people are stepping forward. It's been a disappointment to me that McGregor gave one press conference right at the start. He's not given any other press conferences since then. Don't think Kieran Tierney has given any press conferences under the Nancy era. It's been inexperienced players like Bernardo and Johnny Kenny. It's been Austin Trusty. I think one of the problems also with some of Wilfried Nancy's press conferences and interviews, I think he's got a particular way of speaking, that he's also got his own sense of humour, his own philosophy, which is a bit different from what we have. It's much the same, actually, as Martin O'Neill made quite a number of jokes in his press conferences, which nobody at the press conference particularly got. Some of the jokes weren't particularly funny, but he thought they were funny. I think, actually, Wilfried Nancy, given the fact that he's French, he's thinking in French and then translating it and speaking in English. So I think some of the things he's saying are coming across differently, coming across not the way that he intends them. I think he's got a particular philosophy, a particular personality, and some people aren't liking that. I don't think he's rude. I don't think he's arrogant. I think he did his research into Celtic. I think he knew how big the job was, and things haven't worked out for him. But as Lauren is saying here, there's been a lack of leadership for me off the pitch, and a lack of leadership on the pitch, particularly in the McGregors, the Schmeichels, the Hitatis, the Maedas, etc. What you really, really would think is, in the good old days, that people like Chris Sutton, Henrik Larsson, Paul Lambert, Alan Thompson, Neil Lennon, Tom Boyd, Bobo Baldi would roll up their sleeves, etc., and get stuck in. More recently, your Scott Browns would roll up their sleeves, get all the players really fired up and playing for themselves, playing for the team, playing for the shirt, playing for the club, playing for the manager. I think you also, Pat McLaughlin, you make a great point. I think also Martin O'Neill had such a great reputation, a great legacy at Celtic, that he got given a lot more latitude for things than probably anybody else did. I think also the fans really respected him, the players really respected him. It could also be the fact that the players knew McManus, Maloney, Fotheringham, etc. They're all ex-Celtic players. Maloney and McManus were still involved with the club. Fotheringham came back to it. Maybe all these factors are really helpful. I think also Martin O'Neill has great reputation, great legacy at Celtic. He was very successful at Leicester. However, if you look at the jobs that O'Neill did after leaving Celtic, he was unsuccessful at Aston Villa, unsuccessful at Sunderland, unsuccessful at Nottingham Forest, and wasn't really a success as the manager of the Ireland international side. So one could argue that O'Neill's record as a manager at Villa, Sunderland, Ireland, and Nottingham Forest was actually all rather poor. His win rates in those 4 different jobs after leaving Celtic were all 50% or less. He lost his job at Forest within about 9 months. He wasn't at Villa for longer than a couple of seasons. He had 2 or 3 seasons at Sunderland. He didn't particularly take Ireland very anywhere as the manager of Ireland. However, no doubting he was a brilliant, brilliant manager for Celtic first time around, and he did something that Nancy can't do and Rodgers couldn't do in the second half of Rodgers' time this season. So the spell from September through to the end of October, Rodgers wasn't getting the team playing well, but also when the team wasn't playing well, it was losing games and drawing games. O'Neill very much, when the team wasn't playing particularly well, the team found a way to win, or he and Maloney found a way for the team to win. So people calling for Martin O'Neill to be given the job permanently. I don't know. I think having a manager who's 73 years old is a risk. Having a manager who's 73 years old, who hadn't managed a football team for about 6 years prior to getting the Celtics, so he got sacked by Forest, I think, in 2019. I might be wrong. He then had 6 years out of football just as a pundit on TV and radio and stuff. Whether giving him a full-time permanent job as the manager of Celtic's a good idea at 73, with him having been out of proper management for 6 years. A lot of the other older managers have carried on managing on a continuous basis. So the Roy Hodgsons, the guy who's now managing Roma, several others, they've never taken 6 years off of management and come back to management like O'Neill had done. So I think Brian McGarry's 7687. I think you're making a super point there. I think there are an awful lot of things going wrong at Celtic. And I think, unfortunately, as virtually always is the case at any football club, the manager is the scapegoat. It's the manager who loses their job. It's not the players that lose their job. For me, yesterday in particular, so many of Celtic's players didn't do their job. The passing was poorer than it has been, than it was in the first few games under Nancy. The finishing was especially bad last night. As I said, 8 what you would call easy chances. None of them went in. We did score 1 goal, which actually was one of the hardest chances we had in that game. Maeda had not a very good angle. He hit a brilliant shot into the far corner. And yet, 70 minutes later, he misses an open goal from in front of the goal. As I say, Kenny had 5 chances in the first half. 4 of them were easy chances, 1-on-1 with goalkeeper, or the other one, the left-footed one that he missed the post with, from right in front of the goals. The whole goal to shoot at. He went left-footed when he should have gone right-footed. Hitting it right-footed, the goalkeeper would have had virtually no chance, no matter where he shot, apart from straight at the goalkeeper. We had similar misses in the Hearts game, with Maeda in the first 9 minutes, Engels at the end of that game, where we missed basically brilliant, easy chances. There's only so much that the manager can do if players can't put away those chances. If players clean on goal, open goal, can't put it in the back of the net. I'm not sure how we blame Nancy for that. Pope Leo the 14th. I think Celtic have got so used to winning that because we're not winning at the moment, I think it's hitting us incredibly hard. As I said, I was very, very low and despondent after the St Mirren match. When we started so well against Dundee, I was suddenly a lot happier. However, the fact that we didn't put away those chances, and the fact that the other 3 games under Nancy, we'd had one very bad half and a decent half in those other 3 games, I thought, this is going to be the game where we put 2 halves together and we come out in the second half and we keep on the front foot. However, unfortunately, we let Dundee back into the game. We failed to clear our lines. We kept them being under pressure. Johnny Kenny wasn't an out ball in the second half. People like Maeda, McCowan, Yang weren't coming for the ball to get the ball out wide and get the ball up the pitch. Lots of things went wrong. I don't think Nancy changed the tactics in the least bit at half-time. I don't think there was anything in particular that Dundee United did in the first half that would cause Nancy to need to change his tactics. It just felt like in the first 15 minutes, 20 minutes of the second half, Dundee United got on the front foot and we couldn't get them off the front foot. We couldn't get the ball cleared up the other end. So many of Kasper Schmeichel's passes out of defence just put us back under pressure. There's an argument to say that maybe what Celtic do is just punt the ball up the other end and push up the defensive line and keep Dundee United pegged in their own half. That might have been a way to do it. However, Dundee United had 4 corners in the second half at the start. We defended poorly in all 4 occasions, and then with the third and fourth corners, we gave away goals. There's only so much I think a manager, a coach can do to actually get the players reacting to what's happening on the pitch or reacting to their chance. It felt like Kenny each time and Yamada rushed taking the chance. In each of the cases, they had that extra second or two. They could have just have taken their breath, calmed themselves down, and then more calmly taken the shot. It felt like Kenny rushed his chances. Yamada definitely rushed his chances in the second half. Quite why Maeda misses an open goal from 2 yards, I don't know. Yes, and I think that's a brilliant point. And again, I don't from the way that Nancy talks and the way that Nancy coached at Columbus Crew in Montreal, lack of urgency was definitely not the way that he coached these players to play there. Lack of urgency was certainly something that Brendan Rodgers drummed into the players for his 2 seasons, which was the complete opposite of the way that Ange Postecoglou had coached the 2 years before. Now, the players seem to be able to play quickly and with urgency under Postecoglou. Rodgers took them out of that way. He wanted them to build up slowly, patiently, probe for a gap, pass, open up the team. But so much of the passing under Rodgers was slow, backwards, sidewards, etc. Under Postecoglou, a lot of passes were quick, forward, quick restarts from corners, free kicks, throw-ins, etc. Celtic were always on the front foot under Postecoglou. We didn't let the other team get themselves sorted out in defence. And if Celtic play the way that they can do and have done at brief spells under Nancy, such as the first 30 minutes against Hearts, when Hearts didn't get the ball out their box until their half until the 27th minute. If Celtic could keep playing that way, they're going to win lots and lots of games. If they could play the way they did against Dundee United, who had 1 or 2 minor attacks in the first half, if they could play that way for 90 minutes, they're going to win lots and lots of games, which I think is kind of what Nancy is trying to say in his press conferences, but clearly not getting the message across to the fans, the pundits, the media, to the players, etc. Under Postecoglou, we played all-action football for the whole 90 minutes, and it really, really worked under Postecoglou. That's kind of what Nancy wants to come back into Celtic, and half the players on the side, at least, are players that are Postecoglou players. So they played it under Postecoglou. They should be able to play it now, and they're not playing it now. Maybe they got too slow from the 2 years of Rodgers football. It certainly is. You're entirely right. It's a long time since Celtic won a European knockout, a new knockout game. The last time Celtic, we had a couple of last 16s under Gordon Strachan. We had the last 24 in effect under Brendan Rodgers last season. With a wee bit of luck against Bayern Munich, that could have been a last 16 against that team. But we made a defensive error late in the game against Bayern Munich. We made a couple of defensive errors in the home leg against Bayern Munich that cost us that game. But you're entirely right. It's a long, long time. I'm now 58 years old, so it's a long time since Celtic won a European knockout game. And it's a long, long time since Celtic got into... so the Gordon Strachan years is the last time Celtic got into the last 16 of a big European competition. Even when we dropped down into the Europa League or the Conference League under Postecoglou, things didn't go at all well. Yes, good point. Pope Leo XIV. Schmeichel wasn't actually playing that well for Denmark in the game against us when Scotland beat them to qualify straight for the World Cup. It doesn't feel as if Schmeichel's actually played at all well since he did his shoulder playing for Denmark against Portugal last spring. He missed a number of games. With that shoulder injury, he came back in for a game or two at the end of the season, including the cup final. It doesn't feel like Schmeichel has been the goalkeeper that he had been up until that point since that injury. Whether that shoulder injury is affecting him, I don't know. Quite why his distribution, his passing, etc., has got so poor. What disappointed me a lot yesterday, as Lauren was pointing out just recently, lack of urgency, lack of players actually making a proper run. The number of times you had players like Trusty and Tierney and McGregor and Paulo Bernardo and Hatate kind of gesticulating to somebody to actually make a run, get into space. It just didn't feel as if in the second half particularly people were making a run. And again, I can't see that as being anything that Wilfried Nancy is coaching into them, because his tactics that he's used at Montreal and Columbus Crew is lots of people making runs. So there are 4 or 5 people to pass to. There are 4 or 5 people in and around the box to pass to or to score the goal. There are 4 or 5 people coming back to help out in defence, to help defend corners, free kicks, when the other team's on the counter-attack, etc. 4 or 5 people go back to help the defence, but also helps transition the ball back up the other end quickly if Celtic or Columbus Crew or Montreal does win the ball back, etc. Yeah. He certainly hasn't been, whether the injury is a problem, whether his confidence, as happens after injury, some people do lose their self-confidence because they've injured themselves, whether that shoulder's still causing him problems. I would really like... Schmeichel is a big guy. He's tall, he's strong, he's really quite athletic for a tall person. I really wish he would come for more crosses, come to get the ball, also to organise the defence. He doesn't seem to be a leader in defence like you'd expect a player of his experience. He doesn't seem to come for corners and crosses as well as he should do, which partly, I think, is the problem with us not defending corners and long balls that well. I think there's quite a lot of merit in that. I think Celtic do have good players. We have lots of players who are internationals. We have a couple of players such as McGregor, who's decided not to be an international, but I'm sure if he said he wanted to come back to play for Scotland, Stevie Clarke would put him back in the World Cup squad. I think that's very much a recurring theme of lots of us, is that Schmeichel, for one reason or another, needs to have a rest, either temporarily for a few games, or he gets rested for a few games. Sinisalo gets to come in and take over, and if Sinisalo does a good job, he gets to be the goalkeeper on an ongoing basis until things go wrong for Sinisalo or Sinisalo gets injured. My personal feeling is, after Sinisalo came in the end of last season and did so well, that he should have got to be the goalkeeper for the rest of the season, and then possibly in pre-season training you could have had Sinisalo and Schmeichel both challenging for the number 1 jersey. However, it appears under Rodgers at the end of last season, as soon as Schmeichel was about 80% fit, he was back into the team. And I think that did actually cost Celtic in the cup final against Aberdeen, because Schmeichel's handling was poor. And it was his handling error that gave Aberdeen the equaliser, which then led on to Aberdeen winning the cup on penalties. I'd make a good point, Smell the Glove. I wouldn't be too surprised if Sinisalo didn't put in a transfer request. I think when he got signed by Rodgers a couple of seasons ago, I think the expectation was that Schmeichel would be goalkeeper last season and this season, then Schmeichel would retire. One of the problems that Celtic have got personally is that, a bit like Brendan Rodgers in the summer, not committing to a contract for another 2 or 3 years, we've got the same problem with Kasper Schmeichel. It appears that Celtic went to him maybe around about October time saying, we'd like to negotiate extending your contract for another 2 seasons. But he said, no, I'll don't want to talk about it now. I'll talk about it again in the spring. I can't remember when Denmark's World Cup qualifier is, which will decide whether they go to the World Cup or don't go to the World Cup, but it may be that time. I can't remember exactly. But it kind of feels like that Schmeichel might be delaying making a decision about coming back next season or the season after at Celtic, dependent on how Denmark do in terms of qualifying for the World Cup. I don't know whether you've been naive, Clashman Numpty, or whether it's you like me are naive. I don't know whether it's naivety. I don't know whether it's being overly optimistic and hopeful. As I said, as from that wee table I think I put up a wee minute, 10, 15, 20 minutes ago, we have been in similar situations at the end of a year, mid-season, and in the second half of the season come through with a good run of results, a good winter transfer window, all these different things. We've had a couple of those. So if that's when the Denmark final qualifier is, it makes a lot of sense, because it's around about that time. I think it was around about March, April is when Schmeichel said he would start talking to Celtic about extending his contract. So I do wonder whether, if Denmark get knocked out of the World Cup, he'll decide to retire at the World Cup and thus not come back to play for Celtic next season. I just think these kind of things are actually quite disruptive. I think if Sinisalo knew that he was going to be Celtic's goalkeeper from the start of next season onwards, he probably would stay at Celtic. He's got a 5-year contract, so he's still got 3-4 years left in his contract. However, there's a lot of rumours that Celtic are looking at Messier from Leeds or Ortega from Man City. Both of them are good, high-quality goalkeepers. They're both going to be out of contract next summer. So they've got 6 months or less on their contracts, so that we could get them now for a low fee, or we could get them in the summer for nothing. Yes, I think that Lauren is a good point. What we really require is a Gary Hooper style of player, maybe also Lee Griffiths. I think Lee Griffiths scored, I think, again, I might be wrong with this. I think Lee Griffiths scored 40 goals for Celtic one season. Obviously, Henrik Larsson is a class above anything we've had for a long, long time at Celtic, since the days of maybe Dalglish and Dixie Deans and so on, who were players who could score an absolute boatload of goals. Gary Hooper was a good player at Celtic, didn't do an awful lot for Celtic apart from score goals. Lee Griffiths, slightly more of a rounded player. He was really good at free kicks, pretty good at penalty kicks. He could run in behind. He could support his fellow attackers. Gary Hooper, I thought, was a super player for Celtic. Not the most talented player, but he was a very reliable goal scorer for Celtic. And it's the kind of player that we could really do with now. Whether if Adam Ida had stayed at the club longer, could he have turned into a reliable goal scorer? I'm not so sure. Part of Ida's problem was he backed up Kyogo for a long time, and then he was backing up Maeda in the second half of the season. I think Kyogo has kind of proven with his poor form at Rennes and now his poor form at Birmingham, probably he has passed his best. His last half a season at Celtic wasn't that great either. But fully agree. What Celtic really require is somebody who can put the ball in the back of the net on a regular basis. A player that can score a goal a game, a goal every 2 games. As I said, one of the players that Celtic supposedly are linked to, Wissam Abu Ali, the Palestinian-Danish player who plays in America for Columbus Crew. His goal-scoring record over his whole career is about 1 goal every 2 games. Montianu, the Romanian player, has a similar record at a number of different clubs of a goal every couple of games, a goal or so. You look at a brilliant goal scorer like Dixie Deans, scored not quite a goal a game, but wasn't too far off of it. And if we had somebody in front of goal yesterday who was a reliable goal scorer, we would have been 3-4-5 up at half time because of the number of chances that Johnny Kenny missed. Also, a couple of times he wasn't in the box for really good crosses from Hatate or from Maeda. Kenny was a step or 2 behind where he needed to be. So I do wonder if we had a Lee Griffiths in the box or a Gary Hooper in the box, whether we last night would have scored 2 or 3 goals or more in that first half. Whether if we'd had Dyson Maeda in the middle of the box rather than out wide on the left, whether he would have put those chances away, I don't know, because after all, he was given one of the simplest chances ever, and he managed to miss from an open goal from a couple of yards out. So I don't know. So Adam Ida, his goals per minutes played in the loan season was, in essence, he scored 1 goal every 90 minutes playing for Celtic in that half season. His time at Celtic when he was actually a permanent player, and so last season, basically, when he scored his 20 goals, he scored the goals at roughly 1 goal every 120 minutes, which was considerably better than Kyogo's career record at Celtic, better than Dyson Maeda's record at Celtic. So actually, if you're looking at goals per minute played, Ida's record in his loan season, half a season, was a goal every 90 minutes. In his permanent season, when he was on the bench a lot, backing up Kyogo or backing up Maeda, he scored a goal every 120 minutes. So Anthony Stokes scored a lot of goals for Celtic as well. He was pretty decent, reliable striker. At the same time, we also had Chris Commons, who was good at putting the ball in the back of the net. So I'm not saying we have to get a Henrik Larsson back into the club or a Chris Sutton or a John Hartson. But if we get a player of the quality of Stokes, Griffiths, or Hooper, or Commons, etc., who scores 20-plus goals a season. That kind of goal scorer last night would have scored 2 or 3 with the chances that Yamada and Kenny wasted for us last night. Yes. No, it's really, really sad, actually, the Anthony Stokes and to a lesser extent Lee Griffiths, both players very, very talented, who their life off the pitch hasn't gone terribly well, especially, obviously, Anthony Stokes, who's got himself in massive problems. Lee Griffiths' career is not actually that old, but I think he's playing in Australia at the moment. His career, particularly in the first season of COVID, he didn't look after himself physically or mentally during the COVID shutdown. My personal feeling is that what was probably agreed when Nancy came into the club in December in the negotiations was he would have a transfer kitty of £20 million this January and a similar transfer kitty of 20 to 30 million in the summer, plus spending the money that was brought in if we sold players like Maeda, Hatate, Yang, etc., etc. Quite whether Celtic follow through with that level of transfer budget if Nancy's results don't improve. As I wouldn't be personally surprised if he's got 1 game or 2 games left in him, left as Celtic manager. If he doesn't win on Sunday, it could be that's his last game. If he doesn't win on Sunday and then doesn't beat Livingston the following game, I think he's definitely definitely out. Just simply because all the pressure, the campaigns, the protests, etc., behind the scenes, all the media pressure, the pundit pressure, etc., is going to get too much. That even the Nicholsons and the Brian Wilsons, the Lawwells and the Desmonds, etc., will have to cave into that pressure. No, Lee Griffiths, brilliant player. Maybe not the brightest player off the pitch, and definitely not a player that spent his money terribly well. Quite a lot of bad habits in terms of alcohol and gambling, reportedly. He came back from the COVID shutdown spell about 2 stone overweight, unlike a lot of the other players who kept themselves really, really fit with home exercise and gyms and stuff at home. Lee Griffiths came back having not stuck to his diet, not stuck to the fitness regime, not stuck to the exercises he was supposed to do to keep himself fit, and his career since then has not been the same. Brilliant player, scored a ton of goals for Celtic. He's still young enough to be a top level player. Just his lifestyle off the pitch, his fitness levels, his mentality maybe wasn't the highest levels. To the best of my knowledge, I think he is still playing in Australian soccer, the Australian Soccer League. One of the problems I think one of the problems as kind of I was alluding to just a wee short time ago was the fact that Celtic went to Brendan Rodgers in the summer with an offer of a new 3-year contract, again on £3 to £3.5 million a year, if not more, and he decided to defer signing a new contract until March or April of 2026. So in essence, Celtic gave him an offer of a contract in July, according to multiple sources, at the same level, if not more money, with probably some form of commitment to buy a transfer budget in the summer and in the winter. He chose to turn that contract offer down. He deferred any talks about the new contract until the spring of 2026. It felt like Rodgers already was lining up this sort of big cash move to Saudi Arabia. I don't know. Some people were talking about Rodgers having an ambition to manage in a new country, such as Saudi Arabia or in Europe, or some people were talking about Rodgers going to manage internationally. It just kind of felt like Rodgers didn't see himself at Celtic longer than 3 years, i.e., he'd already decided that this was going to be his last season at Celtic. The fact that he's relatively quickly got this job in Saudi all lined up and delivered suggests maybe that he and his agent had things going on behind the scenes. It's a good point that he was the Celtic manager at the time and Celtic should have funded him. It may be that the board didn't feel that he was committing to the club, i.e. he had turned down the contract in the summer. He wasn't going to negotiate a new contract until the spring of 2026. It's more difficult if you are a player coming into the club, if you don't think your manager is going to be the manager in 6 months' time. And I think that's a problem possible with some of the players at the club at the moment. It certainly could be the problem with the players who come in the transfer window in January, of there being uncertainty about who's going to be the manager of Celtic in the summer of 2026 onwards. I think that could have been had Martin O'Neill stayed as caretaker manager to the end of the season, as a lot of people wanted at the time and want now. The problem would then be that transfer window in January 2026, so in 2-3 weeks' time, is would players want to commit to a club when there's uncertainty whether O'Neill or whomever is going to be the manager come the summer? Because new managers come in, typically you have turnover of players, new people are brought in, etc., etc. I don't fault Rodgers for taking the big money. As I said, I just wonder whether he and his agent already had something lined up for next year, or even for this year. I don't know. Yes, I think possibly Brendan Rodgers isn't the easiest person to work with. I think Dermot Desmond is not the easiest person to work with. People like Nicholson seem far too quiet for me in terms of being in front of the cameras. Quite what Nicholson's like behind the scenes, I don't know. I don't think actually Peter Lawwell has much of a control over the players, the board, players, the coaches, the management, etc. on a day-to-day basis. I think a lot more of Peter Lawwell's job was organising the board, organising meetings, but also being kind of a figurehead for merchandising, sponsorship committees with the Scottish the SPFL committees with UEFA, etc. I don't think he had a big role day to day at Celtic, having been the chairman. I think when he was the chief executive, obviously he was involved day in, day out, like Nicholson is. So I don't think Rodgers is a particularly easy person to work with. And I think certainly quite a number of the people who are in power at Celtic are probably not the easiest person to work with. Well, certainly Brendan Rodgers' record at Celtic is very, very good. His record before coming to Celtic wasn't terribly good. He is the only Liverpool manager who's had 3 whole seasons and won absolutely nothing. So all previous Liverpool managers who've been in the job for 3 years or more had won at least one trophy. So Rodgers was the first Liverpool manager who had 3 whole seasons and won absolutely nothing. So one could say that at Liverpool, at the highest level with Liverpool, he won absolutely 0. Now he came to Celtic, he won a whole lot of trophies. He went down to Leicester. I think he won the cup. He got them a couple of higher positions in the English Premier League. Then season 3, like at many places he's been before, he had a poor third season, and at Liverpool and at Leicester he got sacked in his 4th season. So at Celtic, Brendan Rodgers, brilliant record. At other clubs, not a great record. One could say the same actually for Martin O'Neill. Martin O'Neill at Celtic, brilliant record. At Leicester, Martin O'Neill had a pretty decent record, a couple of League Cups, etc. Since leaving Celtic first time around, O'Neill had a poorish time at Aston Villa, poor time at Sunderland, poor time at Nottingham Forest, and not a great time as the Ireland manager. So, totally agree. Rodgers' record as a Celtic manager, brilliant. As a manager elsewhere, not that great. Just going to try and catch up with some of these comments. It's a very difficult question to answer. I think, given the fact that the players, the experienced players that Nancy has fit to play for him, I don't think the team that he puts out against Aberdeen on Sunday is that much different from the team that he put out on last night against Dundee United. In terms of a main striker, we've got the options of Johnny Kenny, Daisen Maeda, Shin Yamada, possibly converting Benjamin Nygren back to a striker. Now, Benjamin Nygren's played 7 games for the full Swedish side. 4 of those 7 games have been as a striker. He's scored 3 goals internationally for Sweden. All those 3 goals have been scored whilst playing as a striker. When he's played as a wide player or a midfielder for Sweden, he's not scored any goals, but playing as a striker for Sweden in 4 of those 7 matches, he scored 3 goals. So he clearly seems to have an ability to score goals. He scored quite a lot of goals for Celtic at the start of the season. He's kind of gone off that form since that time. So Celtic are limited in terms of who they play up front. I think there's a strong argument to say that Daisen Maeda had a pretty good first half for Celtic, playing that wide role. I thought in the back 3 that Scales, Tierney, Trusty all played pretty decently, certainly for the first half, not so well in the second half. Tierney's obviously got fitness and fatigue issues. I thought Scales played pretty decently for half a game against St Mirren. Maybe Engels comes back in. Maybe Hatate gets rested. Didn't really think that McCowan or Paulo Bernardo really took their chances to nail down a position in the side. There's an argument going back to a conventional 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1 or something along those lines. But my personal feeling is we're going to have the same problems that we had under Rodgers, the same problems that we had under O'Neill, with lack of creativity and lack of someone to put the ball in the back of the net. I personally would like to see. I'm not too fussed about what system that Celtic play, because I think Celtic's always had quite a fluid system anyway. So starting in a 4-3-3 doesn't necessarily mean that's what you stick the whole way through the game. I would like to see Kasper Schmeichel get a rest. I would like to see people like McGregor, Maeda, Hatate, Ralston, Tierney lead much more on the pitch. I would love to see McGregor take a game by the scruff of the neck and lead the team the way that he has done in the past, the way that Scott Brown would definitely have done, the way that Lambert and Lennon would have done in the olden days. The thing has been that in every game Celtic have played well in spells and then kind of hit the wall, which is why Nancy then has to start bringing new players on or changing the tactics. Clearly against Hearts, we were 2-0 down, so he had to change the tactics. Clearly against Roma, we were 3-0 down at half-time. He had to change the tactics. He made some substitutions. We were 3-1 down to St Mirren. We made 2-1 down and then 3-1 down to St Mirren. We had to change the tactics. We had to change the players. So if Celtic were able to play from start to the finish, you're not needing to change tactics. You're not needing to change personnel other than to take off players who are getting tired, etc., to bring on fresh legs. So I don't think you can really blame Nancy for changing tactics when Celtic are losing games. Or changing tactics at half-time when Celtic aren't on the front foot. If we think about the St Mirren game, 1-1, the Dundee United game, 1-0 up, in essence, in both those games, in the first half, Celtic were well on top. We didn't have to change anything. St Mirren weren't really doing anything in the first half. Dundee United in the first half yesterday weren't really doing anything for us to really have to change our system. We just needed to keep on playing the way that we were. And we didn't keep on playing the way that we were. Yes, I think there's a lot of good sense to that. Yes, assuming that you mean McCowan rather than McGowan, but yes, I think that's a good balance of some of the players who've been playing better than others, giving people like Bernardo and Yamada, who didn't really have much of a look in under O'Neill, and not much of a look in under Rodgers, giving them a chance. Yamada certainly got himself into good positions in when he came on for the last 20 minutes. He missed those chances, but he at least was linking up the play better than Kenny had been doing, linking up the play better than Maeda did when he was the main striker. I'm not so sure about McCowan, but he played half decently under Martin O'Neill. I would like to see somehow or other Colby Donovan got into the side. I think he's a very impressive young player. He's got pace, he's got strength. He's about 6 foot tall, so he does actually give us a bit more of a presence in both boxes. He does actually play the Alcide Johnson role better than Ralston does. I would like to see, in one way or another, Donovan get into the side. That then might allow Anthony Ralston to move out to the right wing-back role. Options for, in that case, using Tierney as the wide left player, with Scales, Trusty and Donovan as the back three, then having Ralston and Tierney as more true wing-backs rather than wingers who come back to defend. I think there's a lot of sense to a lot of different things. And I think what I think the more important thing is for the Celtic players to play to at or near their best form, which they haven't done in these 4 games. Whether that's down to them, whether that's down to Nancy, whether that's down to changing the system, whether that's down to the ongoing stramash and problems off the pitch. Probably it's a mixture of all those different things. Because in general, things in life, things aren't really down to only one reasons. Well, I think Celtic yesterday, we played well right up until half time. We had a half chance in the 42nd minute with Trusty's header from a corner. In the first half, Dundee United really weren't really ever a threat on our goal. We defended things pretty decently in the first half. I don't think Schmeichel really had anything to do in the first half rather than kick the ball out to players, and for 50% of the time his passes out of defence were poor and went out of play or missed the target person. It may be giving Kenny the vote of confidence is what required. He got a vote of confidence. He got kept in the side. A couple of games, he got himself back into the swing of things. He scored some goals. Certainly under Martin O'Neill, he got less of a chance to play under Martin O'Neill. Dyson Murray was more often the main striker under Martin O'Neill. Whether the vote of confidence that if Nancy plays him again against Aberdeen on Sunday, maybe that vote of confidence does him the power of good. Maybe that helps him. Maybe in the 2 or 3 days of training between last night's game and Sunday's game, maybe Celtic work incredibly hard on their finishing skills, chance creation, but also putting the chances away. Maybe that's what Celtic do. Maybe that's what's required. I do certainly agree that Celtic, Celtic have certainly, you're 100% right, have not been able to play a 90-minute game and play well for 90 minutes. They've had a good 30 minutes here. They had a good 40 minutes against Hearts in the first half. As soon as Hearts scored a goal, it's like all the air went out of Celtic's tire or Celtic's balloon. We got a terrible start against St Mirren. At least in that game, we did battle back into the team. But as soon as St Mirren got that second goal on Sunday, it's like, again, all the Celtics fight, all the Celtics energy completely disappeared. Whether that's the players, whether that's Nancy, whether that's the fitness coaches, so whether that's the fitness people and the physios and the medical people at the club aren't getting the players as fit as possible. Maybe that's why Celtic's had so many injuries to top players. The number of hamstring injuries that Celtic have had is actually really rather surprising. Johnston twice, Iheanacho twice, Osmond, Sirachi now twice. That's a lot of hamstring injuries, which usually suggests that there's something wrong with the training regimes. All those hamstring injuries basically started under Rodgers or O'Neill. Admittedly, Iheanacho's second hamstring and was under Nancy. I think Sirachi's second hamstring was also under O'Neill as well. So that's certainly something worthwhile looking at as well. There's a strong argument for that, Lorden. You're quite right. Giving him another game, giving him another game to prove himself might be what he requires. That might also be the case. I'm not saying that I don't remember that particular comment, but I think one could say in the St Mirren match, having lost a goal in 90 seconds, St Mirren were kind of in that game for the next 10 minutes or so, and then Celtic got more and more and more into the game. We scored the equaliser through Hatate. Before that, we'd had the header from Iheanacho that was brilliantly saved. We then had 4 or 5 other shots in and around the box in the first half. So having given up a goal in 90 seconds and St Mirren being in the game for the next 10 minutes, it very much, the next 35 minutes of that half, Celtic were much more on top. You make a perfectly reasonable theory. I don't know whether that's the case. We don't know what would have happened had O'Neill carried on, whether things would have fallen apart. As I said, the last 3 games under O'Neill, Hibs, which was a win, Dundee, which was a win, St Mirren was a win. All those games, we didn't play that well. We had defensive errors. We didn't get punished. Against Hibs, we had a particularly good spell. We scored 2 goals in about 3 or 4 minutes. We didn't play that well after that point. Hibs got more and more into the game. Against St Mirren, we got a late goal, having played rather poorly. Against Dundee, we started really well, got a goal, and then Dundee got back into the game. We missed a lot of chances against Dundee, but we also defended not brilliantly against Dundee. We could easily have given up a goal or 2 to Dundee in the Dundee match. So I don't think the results were great under O'Neill. I don't think the performances, bar the Feyenoord performance, were brilliant performances. Well, there's an argument. There's certainly there is an argument to say that Johnny Kenning missing 4 or 5 pretty simple chances, Shinny Manning missing a couple of pretty easy chances, Dijsselmeyer missing one of the easiest chances you'd ever ask a professional footballer to score. Maybe with 10 minutes or so to go and Maeda equalises, Celtic suddenly get a second burst of energy. Maybe the fans then start cheering them on, like we did against Kilmarnock when we came back to win the game late, like the game against Motherwell when we came back late in the game to win the game late in the game. Maybe like the St Mirren match when McGregor scored that brilliant goal 4 or 5 minutes into added time. Maybe if Maeda scores that goal, we win the game. Maybe if O'Neill was still the manager, maybe we would have done this, that, and the other. However, if Kenny's and Yamada's and Maeda's finishing was like it was last night, we're never going to win any games. If the passing of Hatate, Engels, McGregor, Bernardo is as slow and hesitant as it was last night, we're not going to create chances, we're not going to score goals. Yesterday, particularly in the second half, first half we created so many chances, Maeda down the left, often Hatate down the right, or Yang down the right. We created lots of chances in the first half against Dundee United. We just didn't take them. And there's a strong argument to say that it's the performances of players like Kenny, Yamada, Maeda, and the other players who are going to lose Nancy his job. It would appear that Celtic's hierarchy are giving him at least one more game, possibly 2 more games. If they sack him after the Aberdeen match, whoever comes in is going to be in a deep hole. Same way that Nancy is going to be in a deep hole. It may be that winning a game turns things around on the pitch and off the pitch. Maybe it gets the players confident again. Yes, I 100% agree. It's results that count. And sometimes you win games with deflected shots. Sometimes you win games because a referee makes a mistake. Sometimes you win a game because a player who's offside isn't flagged offside. It doesn't go to VAR because a goal's not scored. However, in the second attack from the corner, the free kick that follows, a goal then is scored. Sometimes VAR turns down a penalty. Sometimes VAR gives you a penalty nowadays. All these things can affect the results. Under O'Neill, when we got the rub of the green, a bit of luck, we took advantage of it. Quite often, when another team got a bit of a rub of the green or we made a mistake in those other games, the other team didn't take advantage of defensive errors. Or the St Mirren League match, Celtic got the VAR overturned the goal the own goal that Scales scored. Yes, so O'Neill's Shyamalan is definitely there in the background. Clashman Numpty, he could come in at a moment's notice. McManus is still out and about. Fotheringham hasn't been given a permanent job as far as I'm aware. So theoretically, all those three could come in at the drop of a hat. Whether they could turn things around, whether it was a mixture of them and Martin O'Neill that turned things around. But I agree 100% with the comment someone made earlier on, Graham Martin made earlier on. Results is all that counts. Winning's all that counts. I think what Nancy has said in his press conference is, if you play well, you win games. And I think nobody would dispute that. Sometimes you win games playing not so well. And certainly under O'Neill, we won games playing not so well. Sometimes in several of the games under O'Neill, we had a bit of the rub of the green. We had the opponents hitting the bar, hitting the post. We had opponents missing pretty easy chances. In a lot of those games, we also, although we didn't take all our chances, we took enough chances to win those games. Defensive errors weren't always punished in those games. I think the spirit under Martin O'Neill was a lot better than it had been under Rodgers. It doesn't seem so good under Wilfried Nancy, whether that's simply because players have quickly lost their confidence. I don't know. I think there's probably lots and lots of different things going on in the background. Anyway, it certainly has been an awful 10 days, 14 days, however long it is since Wilfried Nancy came in. If we're talking about 14 years, I think probably we're talking about the 14 years of misery from the end of the successful spells Celtic had in the late 70s. We had a pretty barren 80s and 90s. We did win the odd thing here and there in that spell. It was a long time until 97, 98 when we won the league under Wim Jansen. We then had a couple of not so great seasons under Venglosh and then Barnes. And then the Martin O'Neill first spell onwards, it's been doubles and trebles and leagues coming out of our ears. But certainly for old Celtic supporters like me, we had 15 years in my early years as a Celtic supporter, in my teenage years, in my 20s and 30s, when Celtic weren't winning anything or winning hardly at all. Haven't seen any speculation regarding Maloney going to Kilmarnock. The name that I saw was Naismith, the ex-Hearts and Rangers player, the ex-Hearts manager. Obviously, being an ex-Kilmarnock player, Naismith would fit in really well at Kilmarnock. So I would see that more him going to Kilmarnock. I can more see Naismith going to Kilmarnock rather than Maloney. I think a good point. I'm not sure Maloney would take the Kilmarnock job. I'm not sure that Maloney would take the Raith Rovers job. I think he actually seemed quite enthusiastic about the job that he was given at the end of the Brendan Rodgers era. Yes, Graham Martin. This is, as I said a wee bit earlier on the live stream, I was surprised that all three of McManus, Fotheringham, and Maloney all dropped out the coaching staff. Whether they were offered jobs and turned them down, whether they weren't offered jobs, I don't know. Quite what happened, I don't know. Possibly Maloney didn't want to be the assistant manager or a coach under Wilfried Nancy. Maybe the only person that he was willing to be the coach under was Martin O'Neill. Maybe that's also the case for Fotheringham as well. Fotheringham and O'Neill seem to be particularly close. Maloney and O'Neill seem to be particularly close. I think obviously O'Neill knew them both as boy, teenage players, young players in his first spell. So whether they said they weren't going to be a coach under Wilfried Nancy, that's perfectly reasonable. He was bringing in his own coaches from from Montreal and Columbus Crew. Yes. So whether Maloney saw the job of being the pathways manager person at Celtic as being a rewarding job, maybe he thought he would do a good job at it. I think Maloney probably would do a good job at that. Whether so, one of the difficulties is we don't know quite what goes on behind the scenes. I think some of the things that Martin O'Neill has said on his talk radio thing with Jordan and White have been a bit confusing, also a bit inconsistent internally with what he's said before, what he says in some of his talk. You've now got Jordan that's saying that O'Neill wanted to stay as the Celtic manager in the longer term, and had he been offered the job as a permanent manager, he would have taken it. That's certainly nothing that O'Neill ever said, that he wanted to be the Celtic manager permanently. He certainly said he would come. He talked about coming back if Celtic asked him. He said he would stay. He would have stayed on longer had he been asked. The problem Celtic would have is if O'Neill's not the long-term solution, which makes a lot of sense at 73. What Celtic could do with is a manager who's at the club and is successful and is winning things, who year by year takes Celtic further and further forward. We didn't get that under Rodgers the first time. We didn't get that under Neil Lennon when he came in to replace Rodgers. We didn't then get that with Postecoglou when he came in to replace Lennon. We didn't then get that with Rodgers when he came in to replace Postecoglou. And we've had all those managers were there 2.5 years. What you really need at a club is to keep on moving it forward and forward and forward. It is a manager who's there for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. You think about people like Guardiola at Man City, Alex Ferguson, Arsene Wenger before that. There are very, very few managers other than Guardiola in the English Premier League who's actually been at the club any length of time. Jurgen Klopp got several seasons to come good at Liverpool. He came good. There's a lot of argument to say that the team that Arne Slot won the league with last year was actually Jurgen Klopp's team. And also, the curious thing is also kind of to do with what your point there, Smell the Glove, also is that we suddenly, so for years and years and years, we've been disregarding anything that Simon Jordan or Jamie O'Hara or Jason Cundy or all those various different talk sports people have said. We discount virtually everything that Hugh Keevins and the Daily Record bunch say. We disregard a lot of what the Sun says. We disregard lots and lots of other journalists. But suddenly, when Celtic's in trouble and they're saying things, suddenly they become the oracles of expertise and they know what they're talking about, when for years and years they clearly don't know what they're talking about. But suddenly now we're accepting everything that they say as being the gospel truth. Haven't heard anything to that effect. Nancy, when he was asked in the press conference, said that Stevie Woods was still the Celtic goalkeeping coach. I'm pretty sure I saw him on the videos of the training sessions taking the goalkeepers. I don't recall whether he was there last night at the Dundee United match. Don't recall actually whether Stevie Woods was at the matches when O'Neill was the manager, etc. But certainly the training footage certainly seemed to have Stevie Woods in it, despite the fact that people said he'd left the club or was going to leave the club. John Kennedy appears to be going to join Rodgers in Saudi Arabia. I think, as Lauren was saying a wee bit while ago, makes perfect sense to... there's massive amounts of money in Saudi football at the moment if you're a player or a manager. One of the difficulties people like Rodgers and Kennedy and stuff have coming back to Britain is all the tax problems. That was said to be one of the biggest reasons why Steven Gerrard didn't come back to be Rangers manager when the job became available a couple of months ago, was simply the tax problems. It was also a problem for Jordan Henderson, who at one point was linked to coming to play for Celtic. It was mostly the tax reasons that stopped him coming, supposedly, to play for Celtic. Whether we would have wanted him or not, I don't know. And that one of the other things that does disappoint me is that there are hundreds of thousands of websites, football journalists, pundits, ex-players who are desperate to give Celtic a real good kicking. And I think part of the internal strife that Celtic are having, all the internal disputes, I think that just plays into, it allows the Chris Boyds, it allows the Daily Record journalists, it allows the Talk Sports people, all these ex-players, it allows them, Alan McCoy's, the Go Radio people, the Clyde Sports thing, it allows them all a chance to give Celtic a good kicking. And I think what Celtic should be doing is the fans, the Celtic type media, the Celtic ex-players should all be coming around to support the club and protect Nancy, protect the players, protect the Celtic interests. And that's not happening. For me, there's far too much. The Celtic family has completely fallen apart due to a variety of reasons. And like a lot of family fights, sometimes once there's a fight within the family, there's various different factions, the family all falls apart, and it takes a considerably hard lot of work to put your family back together, or put back a relationship or a work relationship, all these kind of things back together. Right. Anyway. So, we're now at 20 past midnight. So we've been going for, it says 3 hours and 16 minutes. My plan had been to have a shorter than average live stream tonight. It's been absolutely wonderful that so many people have joined in. It's been absolutely wonderful that so many people have participated. It's been absolutely wonderful that so many people have debated and discussed and done everything in a really nice spirit. I think we're all very, very sad, very, very frustrated, very, very disappointed with how things have fallen apart at Celtic in the 25-26 season. I think we had a mini recovery under Martin O'Neill. We've had a complete falling away under Wilfried Nancy. I think that's partly due to Wilfried Nancy. It's partly due to the players. It's partly due to this things going on off the pitch. Yep. So as I said, it's now gone midnight. We've moved from Thursday to Friday. So I think it's time to call it a day. As I said earlier on in the live stream, not going to be doing any live streams over the Christmas and New Year holidays. I will still be doing videos every couple of days, be doing the daily trivia thing. I'll be keeping up-to-date things in the community section, in the news update. So the next live stream is scheduled for January the 8th. If there is something major happens in Celtic world over the Christmas and New Year holidays, which probably is going to be things such as Wilfried Nancy being sacked, or suddenly Dermot Desmond deciding to sack all the board members, sack the executives, and bring in completely new staff, that would be something else worthwhile talking about. But assuming it's just the day-to-day of games and training and so on, obviously when the January transfer window opens, we'll then start having a lot of speculation about players coming and going. we'll start to get some certainty, hopefully in the first week in January, depending who's the manager at that point, whether it's Nancy keeping on going. I think he certainly has got to do, he's got to win one or both of the next two matches. I think if he loses on Sunday, loses against Livingston, I think that's him out the club. And then Celtic are in big stushy because we've got a caretaker manager masterminding the transfer window. So I think for the sake of the club, what we require is for Nancy and the players to win on Sunday, and then having won on Sunday, then have a really good performance against Livingston, play them off the pitch, beat them by a massive score. That gives them even more confidence. They then go into the next match. They beat Rangers in the New Year's day, the New Year's fixture, and then they keep on going from strength to strength. I think that then allows Celtic to settle down on in the pitch and off the pitch. It then allows Nancy to have his transfer window. However, I think all those things are dependent on winning against Aberdeen and then winning against Livingston. And I think then Celtic can then get a momentum. A lot of the off-field stuff might quieten down a bit. But I think we're in a bit of we are obviously, as everybody is well aware, we are in a rotten position at the moment. It's getting worse rather than better. Thank you thank you so much to everybody who has participated. Thank you, Smell the Glove, Pat McLaughlin, Clashman Numpty, Paul Boy 67. Thank you, Lorden from earlier on, Graham Martin. Thank you, everybody who's participated. I'm going to put the live streams on a bit of a Christmas and New Year holiday until the January the 8th. Happy Christmas to everybody. Happy to New Year when everybody when it comes. As I said, hopefully when we start up the live streams back on a weekly basis on January the 8th, hopefully a lot of these issues off the pitch are sorted. Hopefully a lot of these issues, one way or another, on the pitch are sorted. And hopefully when we start the live streams again in the new year on January the 8th, excuse me, January the 8th, things are a lot better. Great. So, as I say, thank you very much for everyone who participated. Thank you for everybody who's participated in all the live streams since we started them a few months ago. So we'll say thank you to everybody. Good luck, everybody. Hopefully everyone has a wonderful Christmas and wonderful New Year. Hopefully the results on the pitch up to and through Christmas get better and better. Hopefully that all gives us a nice Christmas present from Santa Claus, etc. And then more nice presents between Christmas and New Year, nice couple of results leading into the new year. And hopefully when we come back on January the 8th, things will be happy and rosy in the Celtic garden. We'll be challenging from top of the table. We'll have a confident bunch of players. We'll have Shin Yamada, Dyson Maida, Johnny Kenny, Negrin, Hattati, McGregor, all banging in the goals and creating so many chances. We can't not win games, and hopefully, hopefully, yes, yes. Well, you make a good point. Well, I think certainly what Wilfried Nancy is, some people to walk with him, and some people to walk the walk and talk the talk off the pitch and on the pitch, and on the pitch actually deliver results by scoring goals and creating goals. And so, without further ado, we'll call it an evening. We'll say goodbye, and we'll say hail, hail. And thanks everybody for participating tonight. And see you all again on January the 8th.